Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Before I tell you what happened in the canyons, there's something you need to understand. I'm not someone who believes in things I can't explain. For nearly 8 years, I've worked in security and patrol duties in the most remote areas of Utah. I've witnessed many strange occurrences, but there was always a logical explanation. Young people with drones, light reflections from the highways, military exercises from the test site, hot air balloons, heat mirages that fool the eyes during long night shifts. What I saw that night at the edge of the canyon, what Sienna and I witnessed, doesn't fit into any of those neat boxes. And believe me, I've spent the last 6 months trying to make sense of it. It was late October 2023. You know how the desert gets that time of year? The days are still warm enough to make you sweat through your uniform, but the nights drop fast and hard, like someone flips a switch the moment the sun dips below the rim. I was working the night rotation for Basin Patrol Services, a private outfit contracted to monitor the backcountry areas around the national parks. We're not rangers, not exactly. We're more like the security guards nobody sees, the ones who make sure the trailheads stay clear, the campsites don't get trashed, and nobody's out there doing something stupid or illegal in places where help is an hour away on a good day. My route that night covered about 47 miles of unpaved road that winds through BLM land south of Moab, cutting through terrain that looks like Mars had a bad day. Red rock formations that jut up like broken teeth. Dry washes that can turn into churning rivers in minutes if it rains 20 miles away. Juniper trees twisted into shapes that don't look natural. And silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of every sound your truck makes, every breath you take. I'd done this route maybe 200 times. I knew every turnoff, every cattle guard, every place where the road narrowed to nothing and you had to trust your tires would hold the edge. I knew which spots got cell signal and which ones dropped you into total communication blackout. I knew the rhythm of it. Start at the main gate at sunset. Work your way south through Coyote Wash, hook east toward the canyon overlook, then loop back north through Rattlesnake Flats, finishing just before dawn. Boring work mostly. The kind that makes you think about your life choices around 2 a.m. when your coffee's gone cold and there's nothing on the radio but static and occasional bursts of someone else's conversation bleeding through from some distant frequency. That night started like any other. I checked in with dispatch at 6:47 p.m. right on schedule. Sarah, the dispatcher, sounded half asleep already, which was pretty standard for her. She gave me the rundown. No reported campers in my sector, no special alerts, just the usual patrol. She mentioned that Sienna March would be working the northern quadrant, covering the areas closer to the park boundary. Sienna and I had worked overlapping routes a few times before. She was sharp, maybe mid-30s, former Forest Service before she went private. We'd grab coffee sometimes at the turnoff station, swap stories about the weird stuff tourists do. She once found a family trying to camp with a portable generator in a designated wilderness area. Another time, someone had built an entire rock sculpture garden that took her 3 hours to dismantle and haul out. The first few hours were standard. I checked 3 dispersed camping areas, all empty. Logged a broken fence post near mile marker 19, watched the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of orange and purple that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. By 9 p.m., I was heading toward the canyon overlook section, where the road runs along a rim about 800 feet above the canyon floor. This is important. The overlook area is remote even by backcountry standards. No facilities, no markers, just a widening in the road where you can pull off and see down into the canyon. The nearest human presence is usually 15 miles in any direction. No light pollution. No ambient noise. Just you and the landscape, and the kind of darkness that feels old. I pulled up to the overlook around 9:23 p.m. I remember the time because I logged it in my patrol notes. I always stopped there for about 10 minutes, mostly to stretch my legs and check in with dispatch if I've got signal. That night, I had one bar, flickering in and out like it couldn't decide whether to exist. I stepped out of the truck. The temperature had dropped to maybe 45 degrees, cold enough to see my breath. I grabbed my flashlight more out of habit than need. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to cast shadows, turning the canyon walls silver and black. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a reflection. You know how headlights can catch something miles away and create this weird glow? But there were no roads where I was looking. The light was on the canyon wall directly across from where I stood, maybe half a mile away as the crow flies, down about 400 feet on a sheer rock face. It wasn't moving, just sitting there on the vertical stone like someone had painted a circle of orange light about 6 feet wide directly onto the rock. But here's what made my skin crawl. The light wasn't reflecting off the canyon wall. It was sitting in front of it, like there was this thin screen of light between me and the rock was visible behind it, darker where the light should have been illuminating it. That doesn't make sense, I know, but that's exactly what it looked like. The light had no source I could identify, no beam coming down from above, no glow from below, just this circle of soft orange light that looked like it was filtering the canyon wall, not shining on it. I stood there for what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds, trying to make sense of it. Then I did what you're supposed to do. I got my radio out. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got eyes on an anomalous light source at the canyon overlook, requesting backup for identification." Static. I checked the radio. Power was fine. I tried again. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Do you copy?" More static. Then a burst of what sounded like music, tinny and far away, then nothing. The single bar of cell signal I'd had was gone completely now. I was alone with whatever that thing was. I grabbed the binoculars from my truck. Through the lenses, the light looked even stranger. It had texture, like you were looking at it through water, with these subtle ripples moving across its surface. But the night air was completely still, not even a breeze. The kind of dead calm that happens in the desert sometimes, where it feels like the entire world is holding its breath. I swept the binoculars left and right, checking for any explanation. Campfire. No smoke, and it was too uniform, too steady. Someone with a spotlight. The angle was wrong, and the quality of the light was all off. Reflective material catching the moonlight. The moon was behind me, and besides, reflections don't hang in front of surfaces like that. That's when I noticed something else. The usual canyon sounds were gone. I hadn't registered it until that moment, but the night was absolutely silent. No insects, no distant coyotes, no wind whispering through the junipers. Nothing. Just my breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. The light pulsed. Not dimming or brightening exactly, but shifting slightly like watching someone breathe. In, out, steady and rhythmic and completely unnatural. I don't embarrass easily, but I felt fear then. Real fear. The kind that makes your hands shake and your mouth go dry. This wasn't right. This wasn't anything I'd ever seen or could explain. And I was standing on the edge of an 800-foot drop with no backup and no communication in the middle of nowhere. Do you know that feeling when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to leave? That ancient part of your brain that kept your ancestors alive by making them run from predators they couldn't see? That's what I felt. But I'm stubborn, and I'm paid to investigate weird things, so I stayed. I pulled out my phone, thinking maybe I could at least document this. The camera opened, but when I pointed it toward the light, the screen went dark. Not dead, not crashed, just black, like the camera couldn't process what it was seeing. I lowered the phone and the screen came back. Pointed it at the light again. Black screen. I tried 3 more times with the same result. "Okay," I said out loud, just to hear something other than silence. "Okay, this is officially weird." I decided to try something. I turned on my truck's spotlight, the big one mounted on the driver's side that we use to scan campsites and trail areas. I aimed it directly at the orange light on the canyon wall. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. The spotlight beam cut across the canyon, bright and white and normal. It reached the area where the orange light was hanging, and then something impossible happened. The spotlight didn't illuminate the orange light. The orange light illuminated my spotlight. I watched the white beam turn orange as it passed through that circle of light, like the light was a filter, a screen, something that could affect other light passing through it. The canyon wall behind it stayed dark. No reflection, no glare, nothing. And then the orange light changed. It didn't pulse this time. It shifted, moved maybe 6 feet to the left, still maintaining its position in front of the canyon wall, still that same size, still that same impossible quality of sitting in space without a source. Then it moved back to where it had been, then left again, then right, then back. It was responding to my spotlight. I was absolutely certain of that. Someone or something was reacting to the fact that I'd tried to illuminate it. I killed the spotlight immediately, my heart hammering. In the sudden darkness that followed, the orange light seemed brighter, more present. I could see it clearly now even without the binoculars, just hanging there on the dark canyon wall like a painting that shouldn't exist. That's when my radio crackled to life. "Derek? Derek, you there?" It was Sienna's voice, rough with static but recognizable. I grabbed the radio so fast I nearly dropped it. "Sienna, yeah, I'm here. Are you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" "I'm up on Ridge Road. My radio just came back on. I've been trying to reach you for 10 minutes. "There's a light," I said. Orange light on the canyon wall across from the overlook. "It's not moving like it should. It's not normal, Sienna." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, become more serious. "What do you mean it's not moving like it should? It's in front of the wall, not on it. And it just responded to my spotlight, moved when I hit it with the beam." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm 15 minutes from your position. Don't engage it. Just observe and wait for me." "Wasn't planning on engaging it," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "What am I supposed to do? Walk over and introduce myself?" But here's the thing that made my skin crawl even more than the light itself. What if that's exactly what it wanted me to do? What if this whole display was designed to get attention, to draw someone closer? "Derek, stay on the radio with me," Sienna said. "Tell me exactly what you're seeing." So I did. I described every detail while she drove toward my position. The size of the light, the way it sat in space, the texture I'd seen through the binoculars, the way my camera wouldn't work. I told her about the silence, the way all the ambient canyon noise had disappeared. I told her about the movement, the response to my spotlight. "I'm pulling onto the access road now," she said, after what felt like an eternity. "Maybe 5 minutes out. Is the light still there?" I looked through the binoculars again. The orange glow was still present, still in the same position, still pulsing that slow, breathing rhythm. Yeah, it's still here. Okay, I'm going to try something. When I get to the turnoff where you can see the overlook, I'm going to flash my high beams 3 times. Watch the light and tell me if it reacts. Copy that. I waited, watching the light. In the distance, I could see Sienna's headlights working their way down the access road. They disappeared behind a rise, reappeared, closer now. Then they came around the final bend, and I saw her truck pull to a stop about 100 yards from my position. Her high beams flashed. Once. Twice. 3 times. The orange light went white. Not bright white, not like it was illuminated by Sienna's headlights. It just changed color instantly, from that soft orange to a pale, almost blue-white, like moonlight concentrated into a circle. And it stayed that way, no longer pulsing, just hanging there in that new color like it was waiting for something. "Did you see that?" I said into the radio. "It changed color." "I see it." Sienna's voice came back, and there was something in her tone I'd never heard before. Not quite fear, but close, recognition maybe, like she'd seen something like this before. "I'm coming to you. Don't take your eyes off it." She pulled up next to my truck and got out. In the moonlight, I could see she was carrying more than just a flashlight. She had a camera, a real one, not a phone, with a long lens. "How long has it been there?" she asked, moving to stand beside me at the edge. 20 minutes, maybe 25. She raised the camera and started taking pictures. I heard the shutter clicking, rapid fire, at least 15 or 20 shots. "Camera's working for you?" I asked. "So far." She lowered the camera and looked at the images on the display. Her face went pale. "Derek, look at this." I moved closer. On the camera's screen, I could see the canyon wall. Just the canyon wall. No orange light, no white light, just rock and shadow and empty night. "But we can both see it," I said. "Right there, right in front of us." "I know." She raised the camera again, took more shots, checked the display. Same result. The canyon wall with nothing unusual on it. She lowered the camera and we both looked at the actual canyon. The white light was still there, clear as day, hovering in front of the rock face. "This isn't right," she said quietly. "This is really not right." "You think?" I almost laughed, but it came out wrong, more like a cough. "Any ideas?" She was quiet for a moment, still staring at the light. "I've heard stories," she said finally, "from rangers who work the canyon country for decades. They talk about lights sometimes. Not the usual stuff, not headlights or campfires, lights that don't behave right. Lights that watch." "Watch?" I repeated. "What do you mean, watch?" "I mean, they respond to people. They follow. They seem aware." She glanced at me. "I always thought it was just stories, campfire tales. But Derek, that thing moved when you hit it with your spotlight. It changed color when I flashed my headlights. That's not random." We stood there together, watching the light. It had started pulsing again, back to that slow, breathing rhythm, but the color stayed white. The silence remained absolute. No wind, no insects, no distant sounds of the desert night. Just us and the light and the canyon holding its breath. "What do we do?" I asked. Sienna pulled out a flashlight, one of those big tactical ones that can light up a football field. "We try to communicate." "Communicate?" "Sienna, what if what? What if it's dangerous?" "Derek, it's been sitting there for almost half an hour. If it wanted to do something, it could have done it already." She raised the flashlight, pointed it at the light. "I'm going to signal it. Pattern of flashes. If it responds with the same pattern, we'll know for sure it's reacting intentionally." Before I could argue, She flicked the flashlight on and off in a deliberate sequence. 3 quick flashes, pause, 2 quick flashes, pause, 1 long flash. We waited. The white light pulsed 3 times, quick, paused, pulsed twice, quick, paused, then held steady for about 3 seconds. My blood went cold. It copied you. Yeah. Sienna's voice was steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of something else. Not fear. Excitement, maybe. Or recognition that we were dealing with something far beyond our pay grade. It's intelligent, whatever that is, it's aware and it's responding. Okay, so what now? I asked. We've established contact with a light that shouldn't exist. What's the next step? Before she could answer, the white light began to move. Not left or right this time. Down. It descended along the canyon wall, maintaining that same distance from the rock face, that same impossible quality of hanging in space. It moved slowly, deliberately, about 2 feet per second. We watched it drop lower and lower, past formations and ledges and ancient stone, until it reached a point maybe 100 feet above the canyon floor. Then it stopped and began to move toward us. The light didn't move like anything with mass. It glided across the space between the far canyon wall and our position with perfect, unnervingly smooth motion. No acceleration, no deceleration, no variation in speed. Just constant, deliberate progress that defied every instinct I had about how objects move through space. "Sienna?" I said, and my voice sounded very small. "Maybe we should get in the trucks." Not yet. She was still holding the flashlight, and I could see her hand shaking slightly in the moonlight. "We need to document this. We need to see what it does. What if what it does is something we don't want it to do?" She didn't answer. We both just stood there, frozen, as the light crossed the canyon. It took maybe 45 seconds to traverse that half-mile distance, which meant it was moving at about 35, 40 miles per hour. Not fast for a vehicle, but terrifyingly fast for a ball of light with no visible means of propulsion. When it was about 200 yards away, still over the canyon, still maintaining that same altitude of maybe 100 feet above the floor, it stopped again. Now we could see details we couldn't before. The surface of the light had texture, like watching something move underwater. But the patterns were regular, geometric, not quite repeating, but close. Like looking at a very complex wallpaper design that shifts and changes but maintains symmetry. "Are you getting this?" I asked Sienna. She raised her camera, clicked the shutter, checked the display. Still nothing. Camera sees empty air. But we could see it. Crystal clear, perfectly visible, this impossible sphere of white light hanging in the night sky above a Utah canyon like it was the most natural thing in the world. The light began to change color again. White faded to pale blue, then to that orange we'd first seen, then to a soft purple that reminded me of desert twilight. It cycled through these colors slowly, deliberately, like a message we couldn't quite read. "It's showing us something," Sienna said. "It's trying to communicate. Or it's charging up to do something terrible." She shot me a look. "Your optimism is really helpful right now, Derek." The light settled on orange again and held that color. Then it began to descend. Slowly, carefully, it lowered itself toward the canyon floor, and as it dropped, something even stranger happened. The silence broke. All at once, the natural sounds of the night returned. A coyote called from somewhere to the north. Insects chirped in the brush behind us. I heard wind moving through the junipers, a sound so normal and so welcome that I almost laughed. The pressure I hadn't realized was squeezing my chest eased slightly. "It's leaving," Sienna said. There was something like disappointment in her voice. The light reached the canyon floor and settled there. now visible only as a glow between the rock formations, partially obscured by the terrain. It pulsed 3 more times, that same slow breathing rhythm, and then went dark. Just like that. Gone. The canyon returned to normal shadows and moonlight and empty stone. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. My legs felt weak, like I'd been running. My heart was still pounding, but the fear was starting to fade, replaced by something else. Confusion, wonder, and underneath it all, a deep certainty that I'd just witnessed something that shouldn't be possible. Did that really just happen? I finally asked. Sienna lowered her camera. I have no idea what just happened. Your camera didn't pick it up. No, but we both saw it. Yes, and it responded to us, directly, deliberately. Yes. She turned to look at me, and in the moonlight her expression was serious, almost grave. Derek, we can't report this. You know that, right? I did know that. The moment I'd realized what I was seeing, some part of my brain had already calculated the consequences of filing an official report. At best, we'd be laughed at. At worst, we'd be sent for psychological evaluation and probably lose our jobs. What do we say happened tonight? Nothing. Routine patrol. No incidents. She paused. But I want to come back. Come back? Are you serious? Whatever that was, it was trying to communicate. It responded to light signals. It showed us colors in sequence. Derek, this is contact. Real contact with something we don't understand. We have to come back. Every rational part of my mind was screaming that this was a terrible idea. But Sienna was right. We'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Something that changed the basic assumptions about what was possible. How could we just walk away? When? I asked. Tomorrow night, same time, same place. I'll bring better equipment. Real recording gear that might actually capture something. And if it doesn't come back? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then we got lucky and saw something once. But I have a feeling it will come back. I think it was showing us something tonight. I think it wants us to see more. We stood there for a few more minutes, scanning the canyon, but the light didn't reappear. Eventually, we agreed to finish our patrol separately and meet back at the turnoff station before dawn to coordinate our stories, make sure we were aligned on the official report. As I drove away from the overlook, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that orange glow following me. But there was nothing. Just darkness and stars and the road unwinding behind me in the red dust. I finished my patrol in a daze, going through the motions but barely registering what I was seeing. My mind kept replaying the event, trying to find some explanation that made sense. Ball lightning? No, ball lightning moves erratically and doesn't last that long. Some kind of drone? Impossible. No drone could hang perfectly still like that, change colors, or respond so precisely to signals. Military testing? Maybe, but the technology would have to be decades beyond anything publicly known. And why test it here in the middle of nowhere with witnesses? By the time I met Sienna back at the turnoff station, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. She looked as tired as I felt. "You okay?" she asked. Define okay. She laughed, and it was a relief to hear. "Yeah, same. I've been going over it in my head all night. Derek, I checked my GPS log. When that thing was over the canyon, when it was closest to us, my GPS showed my location as 3 miles from where we actually were. The coordinates were just wrong." "What do you mean, wrong?" "I mean the satellite positioning system, which is accurate to within a few feet usually, had no idea where I was. The timestamp was off too. It showed I was at that location for 9 minutes, but we were there for at least 30, maybe 40. A chill ran down my spine. Time displacement? I don't know what it was, but something about that light interferes with technology. GPS, cameras, radio communications. Maybe that's why the cameras couldn't see it. Maybe it exists in a way that our equipment just can't process. That doesn't make any sense. I know. None of this makes sense. She pulled out a notepad, old-fashioned paper and pen. I'm documenting everything the old way, every detail I can remember. Dates, times, weather conditions, our exact positions, the sequence of events. If we're going back tomorrow, I want a baseline for comparison. We spent the next hour going over every aspect of what we'd witnessed, writing down details, comparing observations. We discovered something interesting. We both remembered the exact same sequence of events, but some of the specifics were different. I remembered the light being 6 feet in diameter. She thought it was closer to 8. I remembered it changing colors 5 times. She counted 6. Small discrepancies, but they bothered me. Were our perceptions that different, or was the light somehow affecting how we processed what we were seeing? Tomorrow night, Sienna said as we prepared to leave. 7 p.m., I'll meet you at the Overlook. 7 p.m., I'll be there. I drove home as the sun came up, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and orange that suddenly seemed less beautiful and more ominous. I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed, that some invisible boundary had been crossed. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that orange glow hanging in space, pulsing like a heartbeat. Around noon, I gave up and went to my computer. I started searching. Strange lights Utah canyons. Anomalous illumination desert southwest. Unexplained aerial phenomena Moab area. I found plenty of UFO sighting reports, tourist photos of lens flares and reflected light, but nothing quite like what Sienna and I had witnessed. Then I found something interesting. A forum post from 2019, written by a former BLM ranger who'd worked the area back in the late 90s. He described seeing lights that didn't cast shadows correctly and seemed to exist in front of surfaces rather than on them. He mentioned that several rangers had witnessed similar phenomena over the years but never reported them officially for fear of ridicule. One line from his post stuck with me. Whatever they are, they're curious. They watch. They respond. And they've been here a lot longer than we have. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what Sienna had said. Contact. Real contact with something we don't understand. What did that mean? Who or what were we making contact with? And why at that specific location? The next day crawled by. I tried to act normal, but everything felt off. I kept checking my watch, counting down the hours. Finally, as sunset approached, I headed out to the Overlook. Sienna was already there when I arrived. Her truck parked in the same spot as the night before. She was setting up equipment on a folding table, a video camera on a tripod, some kind of sophisticated audio recording gear, and what looked like an EMF meter. "Going full ghost hunter?" I asked as I walked over. She smiled. "If this thing interferes with regular electronics, maybe it shows up on specialty equipment. EMF meters detect electromagnetic fields. If that light is some kind of plasma or energy phenomenon, it should register. And if it doesn't, then we'll know it's not electromagnetic. Process of elimination." We set up a perimeter of equipment, positioning 3 cameras at different angles, all aimed at the spot where the light had appeared the previous night. Sienna had brought thermal imaging too, and a device she called a spectrum analyzer that could detect radio frequencies. "We're either being very scientific or very crazy," I said. "Maybe both." By 7:15 p.m., the sun was below the horizon. By 7:45, full darkness had set in. We waited, watching the canyon wall, watching the equipment, waiting for something to happen. At 8:07 p.m., exactly 24 hours after the light had first appeared the previous night, the EMF meter started beeping. We both turned to look at it. The needle was moving, swinging rapidly from 0 to maximum and back again, like it couldn't decide what it was measuring. The beeping intensified, became almost frantic. "Derek," Sienna said quietly, "look." I turned back to the canyon. The light was there again, but not in the same position. This time it appeared much closer, maybe only 300 yards away, hovering at about eye level, directly across from us, but over the canyon itself. And it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them now. 3 spheres of light, each about the same size as the original, arranged in a triangle pattern. They weren't touching, but they seemed connected somehow, like they were parts of a larger structure we couldn't quite see. The EMF meter was going insane now, beeping continuously. The video cameras were running, recording. I could hear the thermal imaging unit making its clicking sound as it captured frames. "Is it working?" I asked. "Are the cameras getting this?" Sienna checked the video feed on her phone, which was connected to the main camera. Her face fell. "No, just empty air." But the EMF meter saw something. The audio equipment was picking up something too, a low-frequency hum that I could feel more than hear, a vibration that seemed to resonate in my chest. The 3 lights began to move in unison, rotating around a central point that contained nothing we could see. They spun slowly, maintaining perfect distance from each other, like planets orbiting an invisible sun. "They're dancing," I said. "Or demonstrating," Sienna replied, "showing us something." As we watched, a 4th light appeared in the center of the triangle, smaller than the others, maybe 3 feet across. It pulsed rapidly, much faster than the slow breathing rhythm of the larger lights. Then it began to change colors, orange to white to blue to purple to green and back again, cycling through the spectrum so quickly it became almost difficult to track. The larger lights stopped rotating. All 4 of them held a position, perfectly still, and then as one, they all turned that same shade of orange we'd first seen. "They're waiting," Sienna said. "I think they want us to respond again." She grabbed her flashlight and signaled the same pattern she'd used the night before. 3 quick, 2 quick, 1 long. The lights pulsed in response, matching her pattern exactly. Then they added something new. 4 quick pulses. "They're adding to the sequence," I said, "building on it." Sienna repeated the pattern back. 3 quick, 2 quick, 1 long, 4 quick. The lights responded with the full sequence plus 5 quick pulses at the end. Back and forth we went, adding to the sequence, the lights matching us and extending the pattern. It was like playing a memory game, each round getting longer and more complex. After 7 exchanges, the sequence was 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, 1, 4, 2, 5. And then the lights did something that made my blood run cold. They added a pattern in response that I hadn't seen before, but I knew exactly what it was. 3 quick pulses, then a pause, then 3 more quick pulses. SOS. "They know," I breathed. "They know what that means. They know our signals. Or they learned them," Sienna said, "from watching, from listening." The implications crashed over me like a wave. How long had these lights been here? How many radio transmissions had they intercepted over the years? How many patrol vehicles had they watched? How much of our communication and behavior had they observed and analyzed? The lights began to descend toward the canyon floor again, moving in formation, maintaining their triangular arrangement with the smaller light in the center. As they dropped, the EMF meter's beeping slowed and eventually stopped. The low-frequency hum faded, but this time they didn't disappear. They settled on the canyon floor and stayed there, glowing softly, pulsing in sync, waiting. "I think they want us to come down there," I said. Sienna was already packing up the portable equipment. "There's a trail about quarter-mile back. It's steep, but it leads down to that area." "You're serious? You want to go down there?" "Derek, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Whatever these things are, they're showing us something, teaching us something. We can't just walk away." Every instinct I had was screaming not to go down into that canyon. But she was right. This was bigger than fear, bigger than common sense. This was history happening, right in front of us, and we were the only witnesses. "Okay," I said. "But we stick together, and if anything feels wrong, we run." Agreed. We grabbed flashlights, the handheld EMF meter, and Sienna's camera. The trail down was treacherous in the dark, loose rock and narrow switchbacks with nothing but gravity and hope keeping us from sliding off the edge. It took us 20 minutes to reach the canyon floor, our flashlight beams bouncing off ancient stone walls that had stood for millions of years and would stand for millions more, long after whatever was happening tonight was forgotten. The lights were about 100 yards ahead, still arranged in their triangle, still pulsing that slow rhythm. As we approached, I could see that the ground beneath them was undisturbed. No marks in the sand, no heat shimmer, no indication that anything was there except the light itself. We stopped about 30 feet away. This close, the lights were mesmerizing. The texture I'd seen from a distance was even more complex up close. Patterns within patterns, geometric designs that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "Hello," Sienna said. I almost laughed. The absurdity of greeting lights in a canyon at night. But what else do you say? The lights pulsed, 3 times bright. "They heard you," I said. "Or they're acknowledging us." The smaller light in the center began to move. It drifted forward, separating from the triangle, approaching us slowly. When it was about 10 feet away, it stopped and began to change colors again, but slowly this time, deliberately. Orange, red, yellow, blue, green, purple. Each color held for about 5 seconds before shifting to the next. "It's showing us the spectrum," Sienna said. She raised her hand, palm out, toward the light. "Can you understand us?" The light turned white and pulsed once. Was that a yes? One pulse for yes? Another single pulse of white light. 2 for no? The light pulsed twice. My hands were shaking. This was really happening. We were communicating with something unknown, something that shouldn't exist according to every scientific principle I understood. "What are you?" Sienna asked. The light didn't respond. Instead, it began to draw patterns in the air. It moved in precise lines, creating geometric shapes: triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon. Then more complex forms: spirals, fractals. Designs that looked almost like mathematical equations made visible. "It's teaching us," I said, "or trying to." The light completed its display and returned to the center position. The 3 larger lights began to pulse in sequence, creating a ripple effect around the triangle. The pattern was hypnotic, almost musical in its rhythm, and then something happened that I still can't fully explain. The air around us seemed to thicken, like we'd suddenly gone underwater. Sound became muffled. My vision began to blur around the edges. I felt a pressure in my head, not painful but present, like something was trying to push its way into my thoughts. "Derek," Sienna's voice sounded distant. "I think we should—" The world went white. I can't tell you how long we were in that state. Time became meaningless, elastic. It might have been seconds, it might have been hours. All I knew was light and pressure and a sensation of movement without moving, like standing still while the universe rushed past. When my vision cleared, we were still in the canyon, still standing in the same positions. The lights were still there, still pulsing, but something had changed. The air felt different, charged with some kind of energy I couldn't name. "Did you see that?" Sienna asked. Her voice sounded strange, like she was speaking from very far away, even though she was right next to me. "See what?" "The images, the patterns, in the light." I hadn't seen anything, just whiteness. "What did you see?" "Structures, like blueprints, maybe? Or maps, I don't know. They were there, and then they weren't, but I remember them." She touched her forehead. "It's like they're still in here." The EMF meter in my hand was beeping again, but the pattern was different now. Instead of the frantic random beeping from before, it was rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat. The lights began to move again. They rose from the canyon floor, slowly, maintaining their formation. As they ascended, they started to expand, growing larger and brighter. The smaller center light separated from the triangle and moved directly toward us. I wanted to run. Every fiber of my being was screaming to get away, but I couldn't move. Not frozen exactly, but held by something other than force. Curiosity? Fascination? Or something else? Something the light was doing that I wasn't consciously aware of. The small light stopped directly in front of me, maybe 3 feet from my face. This close, I could see into it, through it, and what I saw made no sense. There were layers of light, dimensions I couldn't count, perspectives that shouldn't be possible from a 3-dimensional object. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected infinite versions of the same thing, each one slightly different, each one real. And then I heard something that wasn't sound. Information, maybe, or concepts flowing directly into my mind without passing through my ears. Not words exactly, but meanings, understanding that bypassed language entirely. The light was showing me something. About itself, about where it came from, about what it was doing here. I can't explain the details because they weren't delivered in a form that translates to language. But I understood in that moment that these lights were part of something vast, something that had been observing this planet for longer than human civilization had existed. They weren't from another world, not exactly. They were from somewhere else, somewhere adjacent to our reality. And they could move between that place and this one through specific locations, specific conditions. The canyon was one such place. There were others scattered across the desert, places where the barrier between here and there was thin enough to cross. They'd been watching us. Not just me and Sienna, but humanity. They'd been present at key moments in our history, observing, recording, occasionally interacting when conditions were right. They didn't interfere, didn't guide. They just watched, with the kind of patience that comes from experiencing time differently than we do. And they were curious about us. Specifically about how we'd react to them. Most people couldn't see them. The lights existed at a frequency, a wavelength, that most human perception couldn't process. Cameras couldn't capture them because cameras were built to detect electromagnetic radiation in specific ranges, and whatever these lights were, they existed outside those ranges. But some people could see them. People whose perception was slightly different, whose neurological patterns were tuned in a way that allowed them to detect what others missed. Sienna and I were 2 such people. We'd been selected isn't quite the right word. Noticed, maybe, identified as individuals who could interact with them directly. The light pulled back slightly and the flow of information stopped. I gasped, suddenly aware that I'd been holding my breath. Next to me, Sienna had tears running down her face. "Did you?" she started to say, but I cut her off. "Yes, I saw it. I understood it." I turned to look at her. "They've been here forever, Sienna. They've been watching us forever. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. And they're not alone. There are others, different kinds. Different, I don't even know what to call them. Entities? Phenomena? The small light returned to the triangle formation. All 4 lights began to pulse in unison, faster now, and the colors shifted through the spectrum so rapidly they became white again, pure and bright. And then they began to change shape. The spherical forms distorted, stretched, became elongated. The triangle arrangement split apart, reformed into a line, then a square, then something more complex, a 3-dimensional geometric pattern that hurt to look at because it had angles that shouldn't exist in normal space. They're showing us their true form, Sienna said, or as close to it as we can perceive. The pattern collapsed back into the familiar spheres. Then, one by one, the lights began to fade. Not moving away, not descending, just gradually becoming less present, like watching something phase out of existence. The larger lights went first, dimming to orange, then red, then gone. The smaller light remained for a moment longer, pulsing 3 times in what I somehow knew was a farewell, and then it too disappeared. We stood in the sudden darkness of the canyon, our flashlights the only illumination, and the silence came crashing back. Normal silence this time, the kind filled with distant coyotes and insects and wind. The world resumed its ordinary operations, as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred. "What do we do now?" I asked. Sienna was quiet for a long time before answering. "We document everything. We come back. We learn more. Derek, they want us to understand. They chose us to be witnesses. Maybe to be, I don't know, ambassadors? Interpreters? We can't just walk away from this." We hiked back up to the rim in silence, both of us processing what we'd experienced. When we reached our trucks, the equipment we'd left behind was still there, still running. Sienna checked the recordings. "Nothing," she said, showing me the video feed. Hours of footage of an empty canyon. The EMF meter readings? She pulled up the data log on her laptop. "See this? At 8:07, the meter shows a spike. Massive electromagnetic disturbance off the scale. Then it flatlines. Then at 8:42, another spike, different pattern. And here at 9:15, when we were down in the canyon with them, the readings are, Derek, this doesn't make sense. The meter is showing negative values. Electromagnetic fields can't go negative. Maybe they can if they're from somewhere else. Or maybe our equipment just isn't built to measure what these things are." We packed up the gear in silence. It was after midnight by the time everything was loaded. We stood by our trucks, neither of us quite ready to leave. "Tomorrow?" Sienna asked. "Tomorrow," I agreed. But the lights didn't appear the next night, or the night after that. For 2 weeks we returned to the overlook every evening, set up equipment, waited. Nothing. The canyon remained dark and empty and stubbornly normal. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, if Sienna and I had shared some kind of mass hallucination brought on by isolation and too many night shifts. But the EMF readings were real. The audio recordings of that low-frequency hum were real. And the things I'd understood when that small light had been close to me, those insights and concepts that defied language, those were burned into my memory with perfect clarity. On the 15th night, just as we were packing up to leave, my radio crackled to life. Not with dispatch or another patrol unit, but with something else, a signal, rhythmic and patterned. 3 pulses, pause, 2 pulses, pause, 1 longer pulse, our sequence from that first night. I grabbed the radio. "Sienna, you hearing this?" "Yeah?" Her voice was tight with excitement. "It's coming from the south, down in Rattlesnake Flats." We drove there as fast as the unpaved roads would allow, bouncing over ruts and rocks, taking turns that could have flipped our trucks if we'd miscalculated. It took 20 minutes to reach the area where the signal seemed strongest. Rattlesnake Flats is different from the Overlook. No dramatic vistas, no sheer cliffs, just a broad, flat expanse of desert floor surrounded by low rock formations, like a natural amphitheater. In the center of the flat, clearly visible in the moonlight, were the lights, but not just 4 this time. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They filled the flat like stars fallen to earth, each one pulsing in sync with the others, creating a field of light that turned the night into artificial day. We pulled to a stop at the edge of the flat and got out. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? This was beyond anything we'd seen before, beyond anything we'd been prepared for. The lights began to move. They rose from the ground in unison, arranged themselves into patterns. Spirals, grids, waves. They were performing for us, demonstrating, showing us capabilities that shouldn't be possible. Some lights moved independently while others moved in groups, but there was no collision, no confusion. Every movement was precise, coordinated, purposeful, and then they coalesced. The individual lights drew together, merged, became fewer but larger. 10 lights, 5, 3, 1. A single massive sphere of light, maybe 50 feet in diameter, hanging in the air above the center of the flat. It didn't pulse. It didn't change colors. It just existed, radiating a soft white glow that illuminated everything around it, but cast no shadows. "My God," Sienna breathed. The sphere began to descend. Slowly, gently, it lowered itself until it was hovering just a few feet above the ground. And then something emerged from it. Not from inside it, but from it, as if the light itself was forming into something else. A figure, vaguely humanoid but not human, tall and slender with proportions that were almost right but not quite. It stood about 7 feet tall, with long limbs and a head that seemed slightly too large. The details were hard to make out because it wasn't solid, not exactly. It was made of light, or perhaps it was wrapped in light, or maybe the light was showing us an approximation of its form because our eyes couldn't process what it really looked like. It moved toward us, not walking, not floating, but transitioning from one position to another without visible motion. One moment it was next to the sphere, the next it was 10 feet closer, then 5 feet closer, until it stood directly in front of us. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I did neither. I just stood there, Sienna beside me, as this impossible thing regarded us with what might have been eyes or might have been something else entirely, and then it spoke. Not with sound, but with that same direct transfer of meaning I'd experienced before. But this time it was clearer, more focused, almost like language. "You are ready to understand." Not a question. A statement, an assessment. "What are you?" Sienna asked out loud. "We are what remains, what watches, what persists beyond the ending of things." The meaning was clear, even though the concepts were alien. We exist between states, between dimensions, between moments. We move through spaces you have no words for. "Why are you here?" I managed to ask. "We observe, we record, we wait." Wait for what? For the moment when you are ready to see us, when consciousness evolves enough to perceive beyond the narrow band you call reality. Some of you can see us now. More will come. This is the beginning of recognition. The figure raised what might have been a hand. The gesture was unmistakable, even though the form wasn't quite right. It pointed at each of us in turn. You are witnesses. You will remember. You will tell others. and they will believe or they will not. But the seed is planted. Recognition spreads. One day, all will see. What happens then? Sienna asked. Then the barrier falls. Then we can meet properly. Then the exchange begins. Exchange of what? Information, perspective, understanding. The figure seemed to consider for a moment. You ask us what we are. We ask you the same question. What are you truly? Your physical form? Your consciousness? The patterns you create in space and time? You are as mysterious to us as we are to you. But you've been watching us for thousands of years, I said. How can we still be mysterious? Because observation is not understanding. We can see what you do. We cannot comprehend why. You are driven by things we do not experience, emotion, mortality, the urgency of limited time. These concepts are alien to us. The figure turned, gesturing to the sphere of light behind it. This form, this place, this interaction. We learn to create it by watching you, how you communicate, how you perceive, what shapes and colors carry meaning. We adapted. We are still adapting. What do you want from us? Sienna asked. Nothing, everything. We want you to know we exist. We want to be seen. For eons we watched from outside your perception. But consciousness is expanding. The veil is thinning. Soon, all of humanity will be able to perceive us. We want to begin the dialogue before fear overwhelms curiosity. The figure moved closer to me. I could feel something radiating from it, not heat, but presence, like standing near a powerful magnet or electrical current. You feel fear now, but also wonder. This is good. This is what we hoped to find. Fear tempered by curiosity. Caution balanced with openness. Others have seen you, I said. Other people in other places. Why us? Why here? This place is special. The barrier is thin here. The stone remembers ancient energies. It facilitates our crossing. And you, the figure gestured to both of us. You are sensitive. Your minds process information in patterns that align with our methods of communication. You can be bridges. Bridges between what? Between your world and the spaces beyond it. Between your species and the others that exist in dimensions you cannot yet access. You will help others understand. You will be the first, but not the last. The figure began to fade, becoming more transparent, the light less defined. We will return. Not tomorrow, perhaps not soon, but we will return, and when we do, more of you will be ready to see us. The awakening has begun. Wait, Sienna called out. How do we prepare? What should we do? Continue to watch. Continue to document. Continue to question. Tell your story. Plant the seed of recognition in other minds. When enough seeds have sprouted, when enough consciousness has expanded, we will return in numbers that cannot be ignored. The figure dissolved completely, flowing back into the sphere of light. The sphere rose into the air, climbing slowly at first, then faster. As it ascended, it began to separate again, splitting into multiple lights, then dozens, then hundreds. They spread across the sky like a cloud of luminous insects, each one following its own path. And within seconds they were gone, scattered so thoroughly that I couldn't track where any individual light had gone. The desert returned to darkness. Normal darkness, punctuated only by stars and a crescent moon. The silence felt different now, not empty but full of potential, like the pause before a symphony begins. Sienna and I stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking, both of us processing what we'd just experienced. Finally, she pulled out her notebook and started writing, capturing every detail while it was still fresh. I did the same, using the Notes app on my phone, typing frantically to get it all down before the specifics began to fade. When we were done, when we'd recorded everything we could remember, we looked at each other in the dim glow of our truck's interior lights. "No one's going to believe this," I said. "I know. We have no proof, no recordings, no physical evidence. Just our testimony. I know," she smiled. "But it happened. We both know it happened, and that figure said others will start seeing them too. We won't be alone in this for long." "What if we are? What if we're the only ones who ever see them?" "Then we'll be the crazy people who tell stories about lights in the canyon. But Derek, I'd rather be crazy and know the truth than sane and blind to what's really out there." We drove back to the station as dawn was breaking, painting the canyon walls in shades of pink and gold. We filed our standard reports. Routine patrol, no incidents. We didn't mention the lights, the figure, the exchange. Those things lived in our private documentation, our personal records, waiting for a time when they could be shared without consequence. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've been back to both locations, dozens of times. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Sienna, occasionally with others who I thought might be able to see what we saw. The lights have appeared 3 more times, always brief, always at a distance. Never again in the concentration we witnessed at Rattlesnake Flats. It's like they're teasing us, reminding us they're still there, still watching, still waiting for whatever threshold needs to be crossed before they reveal themselves fully. I started keeping more detailed records, not just of my own sightings, but of reports from others. I found that forum post from the BLM ranger again and contacted him through the site. He wrote back immediately, seemed relieved to talk to someone who'd experienced similar phenomena. He put me in touch with 3 other rangers, 2 current and 1 retired, who'd all seen lights in the canyons over the years. We started comparing notes. The patterns were consistent. Lights that appeared with no source, that responded to signals, that seemed to exist in front of surfaces rather than on them. Lights that cameras couldn't capture, that GPS couldn't locate properly, that seemed to bend the normal rules of physics and perception. One of the rangers, a woman named Patricia, who'd worked the Moab area for 15 years, told me about an experience from 2011. She'd been on night patrol near Dead Horse Point when she saw what she described as a constellation that decided to come down and visit. Dozens of lights, she said, arranged in patterns that shifted and changed, performing what looked like a choreographed dance above the canyon. She'd watched them for nearly an hour before they rose back into the sky and disappeared. She'd filed a report about unusual aerial activity, but it had been dismissed as likely being drones or military aircraft. "The thing is," she told me over coffee at a diner in Moab, "after that night, I started seeing them more often. Not always that dramatic, but lights in places they shouldn't be. I think once you see them once, really see them, they know. And they let you keep seeing them." "Like they're testing us," I said. "Or recruiting us. Making us witnesses so we can spread the word." She leaned forward, lowering her voice even though the diner was nearly empty. "Derek, I think something's building. I've talked to more people in the last year who've had sightings than in the previous 10 combined. It's accelerating. Whatever they are, whatever they're doing, it's ramping up." I shared this with Sienna, and she'd noticed the same thing. Through various forums and local contacts, she'd found at least 20 people in the Four Corners region who'd reported similar experiences in the past 18 months. Lights that behaved strangely, periods of missing time, feelings of being watched or observed. Strange effects on electronic equipment. "The figure told us this would happen," she said. "That recognition would spread, that more people would become sensitive to their presence. Maybe we're seeing the beginning of that." but recognition comes with challenges. The more we talked about our experiences, even in vague terms, the more we encountered skepticism and ridicule. My supervisors at Basin Patrol started giving me concerned looks. A few colleagues made jokes about Derek's UFO friends. One older patrol officer pulled me aside and suggested I might want to take some time off, maybe talk to someone about the stress of the job. I learned to be more careful, to choose my audience, to frame things in ways that sounded less crazy. Unusual aerial phenomena, possibly military testing, strange atmospheric effects. I never mentioned the figure of light, the direct communication, the sense that we were being observed and evaluated by something from outside our normal reality. Sienna was braver than me. She started a blog, anonymous but detailed, documenting every sighting, every pattern, every piece of evidence we could gather. She posted the EMF readings, the audio recordings of those low-frequency hums, sketches of the geometric patterns the lights had formed. Within weeks, she had followers. Within months, she was getting messages from people all over the Southwest reporting similar experiences. Some were obviously hoaxes or misidentifications, but some were compelling, consistent. Details that matched what we'd seen, described by people who couldn't have known what we'd witnessed because we hadn't shared those specific details publicly yet. One message came from a geology graduate student who'd been doing fieldwork near Capitol Reef. She described seeing lights arranged in what she called a three-dimensional grid pattern that seemed to scan the rock formations. She'd felt compelled to approach them, and when she did, she experienced what she called downloaded information, concepts and ideas that appeared in her mind without being spoken or written. I understood things about the geological history of the area that I'd never studied, she wrote. Things I later verified through research. It's like they showed me the memory of the rock itself, millions of years compressed into a few seconds of understanding. I know how insane this sounds, but it happened. Another message came from a truck driver who regularly hauled loads through the canyon country at night. He'd seen the lights so often that he'd stopped being surprised by them. They follow me sometimes, he wrote. Not threatening, just curious. Like they're keeping pace with my truck to study it. They've never interfered with my driving or tried to make contact. They just watch. The accounts kept coming. A hunting guide near Blanding, a maintenance worker at one of the telescope facilities, an astronomer who'd been imaging the night sky and kept finding anomalies in his data, points of light that appeared and disappeared, that moved in ways that ruled out satellites or aircraft. Each account added another piece to a puzzle we were only beginning to understand. The lights weren't isolated phenomena. They were part of something larger, something that had been present in this region for a very long time but was only now beginning to reveal itself more openly. 3 months after our encounter at Rattlesnake Flats, Sienna got a message that changed everything. It came from an elderly Navajo man named Thomas Begay, who lived on the reservation south of Bluff. He'd read her blog and wanted to talk. We drove out to meet him on a warm spring afternoon. His home was a modest place on a dirt road that wound through red rock country, with a view of the Valley of the Gods in the distance. He invited us in for coffee and immediately asked to see our documentation. We showed him everything. Our notes, the EMF readings, Sienna's sketches, the video footage that showed nothing but captured the audio anomalies. He studied it all carefully, nodding occasionally, asking specific questions about the colors we'd seen, the patterns the lights had formed, the nature of the communication we'd experienced. Finally, he sat back in his chair and looked at us with an expression that was hard to read. "You're not the first," he said. My grandfather told stories about the lights. His grandfather told stories. This goes back further than we have records for. The lights are part of this land. They always have been. Do you know what they are? I asked. I know what my people call them. The Watchers. The ones who existed before, who exist between, who will exist after. They're not spirits, not exactly. Not gods. Something else. Something that moves through this world but isn't entirely of it. He stood and walked to a shelf, pulled down a worn notebook. My grandfather kept records. He was a healer, and sometimes people would come to him after encounters with the lights. He documented what they told him. Most of it is in Navajo, but some is in English. You should read it. The notebook contained decades of accounts, dating back to the 1940s. Story after story of lights in the canyons, lights that communicated, lights that seemed to study human behavior. Some accounts described missing time. Others described information being transferred directly into minds. A few described seeing figures made of light, similar to what Sienna and I had witnessed. "Why are they here?" Sienna asked. "Why this place specifically?" Thomas Begay smiled. "This land is sacred, not just to my people, but to the land itself. The rock here holds memory, power. It's been shaped by forces over millions of years. Water, wind, time, and other things we don't have words for. The barriers between worlds are thin here. The lights can cross more easily. What do they want? I don't think they want anything in the way you mean. They observe. They record. They're witnesses to existence itself. My grandfather believed they were part of how the universe knows itself, how consciousness spreads and grows. They're here because consciousness is here. Where life and awareness exist, they come to observe. But they're becoming more active," I said, "more visible. Why now? Because we're ready, or getting ready. Human consciousness is expanding, changing. We're beginning to understand that reality is larger and stranger than we thought. We're developing tools that can detect things we couldn't before. We're asking better questions. The lights respond to that. They reveal themselves more openly to those who can perceive them properly." We spent hours talking with Thomas, going through his grandfather's notes, comparing them to our own experiences. The consistency was remarkable. Across decades, across different witnesses, the core phenomena remained the same. Lights that behaved impossibly, communication without language, transfer of information, geometric patterns, feelings of being observed and evaluated. As we were leaving, Thomas gave us copies of some of his grandfather's writings. "Share these with others who have seen the lights," he said. "Help them understand they're part of a longer story. This isn't new. This is ancient. We're just finally paying attention." Driving back, Sienna was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Derek, I think we need to go public. Really public, not just blog posts. We need to tell this story properly, get it in front of people who can investigate, who have resources we don't have. And lose our jobs? Get labeled as crazy? Maybe. Probably. But that figure told us we're witnesses, that we're supposed to help others recognize what's happening. We can't do that if we keep hiding what we know." I knew she was right, but I also knew what it would cost. In the end, we compromised. We put together a comprehensive report. All of our documentation, all of the accounts we'd collected, the historical records from Thomas's grandfather, the technical data we'd gathered. We submitted it to several organizations that investigate anomalous phenomena, some scientific, some not, along with detailed testimony from both of us. Most ignored it. A few responded with form letters thanking us for our interest but explaining they couldn't pursue every reported sighting. One organization, a research group affiliated with the university in Nevada, actually sent someone to interview us. Sarah Wright was a physicist who specialized in what she called boundary phenomena, events that occurred at the edges of our current scientific understanding. She listened to our story, examined our evidence, asked detailed questions about everything from the EMF readings to the subjective experiences of communication. "I can't prove what you experienced," she said finally, "but I also can't dismiss it. The data anomalies are real, the consistency across multiple witnesses is compelling, and the historical accounts add a dimension that suggests this is more than just misidentification or hallucination." She promised to include our case in her ongoing research and connected us with other investigators who were examining similar phenomena in different regions. Apparently, we weren't unique. Similar lights, similar behaviors, similar patterns of communication had been reported in remote areas across the Southwest, in the Australian outback, in parts of Scandinavia and Scotland, in the high Andes. "It's like there are certain places on Earth where the membrane between our reality and something else is permeable," Dr. Wright explained. "Areas of geological or electromagnetic significance where unusual phenomena cluster. The lights you've described fit a pattern we're seeing globally." That conversation opened new doors. Through Dr. Wright, we connected with a network of researchers, witnesses, and investigators who were all pursuing the same questions we were. What were these lights? Where did they come from? What was their purpose? And why were sightings increasing? 6 months after our first encounter, almost to the day, I was back at the canyon overlook. Alone this time. Sienna was visiting family in Colorado, and I'd volunteered to take an extra shift. It was a clear night, cold for early spring, with the kind of visibility you only get in the desert when the air is perfectly still. I wasn't expecting anything. The lights appeared when they wanted to, not on our schedule. I was just sitting on the hood of my truck, drinking coffee, watching the stars, thinking about how much my life had changed since that first night. That's when I saw the orange glow appear on the canyon wall. The same position as before, the same size, the same impossible quality of existing in front of the rock rather than on it. I got off the truck and walked to the edge, watching. The light pulsed 3 times, slowly, then changed to white. It began to move, gliding across the canyon wall, descending toward the floor. I grabbed my flashlight and signaled. 3 quick, pause, 2 quick, pause, 1 long. The light responded immediately, matching my pattern. Then it added 4 quick pulses at the end. Our old sequence, remembered, repeated. I climbed down the trail to the canyon floor, moving carefully in the dark, keeping the light in sight the whole time. By the time I reached the bottom, the light was waiting for me, hovering about 6 feet off the ground, pulsing that slow, breathing rhythm. I walked up to it, stopped about 10 feet away. This close, I could see the patterns again, the geometric designs shifting and flowing across its surface. "Hello," I said. The light pulsed once. "Hello back." "It's been a while." Another pulse. Agreement? Acknowledgement? "I've been talking to people, sharing what we saw, trying to help others understand that you're real, that you're here." The light brightened slightly. I felt that familiar pressure in my head, that sense of information being transferred without words. But this time it was simpler, clearer, more accessible. Good. Continue. More we'll see. Recognition spreads. Soon. How soon? The light began to cycle through colors. Orange, red, yellow, blue, green, purple. Each color held for about 3 seconds. When it completed the cycle, it pulsed 7 times. 7 months, years, cycles of some other kind? The light seemed to sense my confusion. It pulsed once more and projected an image directly into my mind. A calendar. Pages flipping rapidly, seasons changing. I saw summer turn to fall, fall to winter, winter to spring. 7 complete cycles. 7 years. In 7 years, everyone will be able to see you? The light didn't pulse yes or no. Instead, it showed me another image. People looking up at the sky, seeing lights where before there had been nothing. Not everyone, the impression conveyed, but many. Enough. A critical mass of recognition that would change everything. What happens then, when enough people can see you? The light expanded, grew larger, and from within it emerged that familiar figure. Tall, slender, made of light but suggesting a form underneath. It stood before me, and I felt no fear this time. Only curiosity and a strange sense of greeting an old friend. "Then we can begin," the figure communicated. Then the real exchange starts. Information flows in both directions. We learn from you. You learn from us. We help each other expand consciousness, understand reality from multiple perspectives. Why wait? Why not just reveal yourselves now to everyone? Consciousness must be ready. Minds must be prepared. If we appeared tomorrow to all humans at once, fear would overwhelm curiosity. Violence would erupt. The opportunity would be lost. The figure gestured to the canyon walls around us. This is why we start small, why we choose witnesses, why we communicate with those who can perceive us. Seeds planted today become forests tomorrow. What should I do? How can I help? Continue as you are. Tell the truth. Document what you see. Connect with others who have seen us. Build the network of recognition. When the time comes, when the 7 cycles complete, those who have been witnesses will be guides for those who are newly awakening. The figure began to fade. We return to you because you are faithful, because you continue to watch and wait. We will come again, and each time we will share more, prepare you more, help you understand more. You are a bridge, Derek. One of many we are building toward the Great Crossing. What crossing? But the figure had dissolved back into the light, and the light itself was beginning to fade. It pulsed 3 more times. 3 slow, deliberate pulses, and then went dark. I stood alone in the canyon, my flashlight the only illumination, and for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel afraid or confused. I felt purpose. I understood my role, even if I didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. I climbed back up to the rim and drove to the turnoff station. Sienna had told me she'd be back the next day, and I couldn't wait to tell her about this encounter. But when I checked my phone, I found a text from her. Saw them in Colorado. 3 lights in a triangle. They knew I was watching. They signaled our pattern. It's spreading, Derek. It's really spreading. I smiled and texted back. 7 years. That's what they told me. 7 years until critical mass. Her response came immediately. Then we've got work to do. I'm writing this now, 6 months after that last encounter. I'm still working patrol in the canyon country, still watching the skies, still documenting everything I see. Sienna and I have connected with 47 other witnesses now, scattered across 5 states. We've collected hundreds of accounts, thousands of hours of testimony, gigabytes of data that all point to the same conclusion. Something is happening. Something unprecedented. The lights are becoming more common, more visible, more active. And not just in the desert Southwest. Reports are coming from all over the world now. Some people are starting to pay attention. Most still dismiss it as mass delusion or misidentification. But the momentum is building. In 7 years, if the light figure was accurate, everything changes. In 7 years, enough of humanity will have expanded its perception to see what's been there all along. And when that happens, when we can finally perceive our observers properly, the real conversation begins. I don't know what that conversation will entail. I don't know what we'll learn or what we'll have to teach. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. We are not alone. We have never been alone, and very soon we won't be able to pretend otherwise. The canyon still stands, ancient and patient, holding its secrets and its memories. The lights still appear, pulsing their slow rhythms, communicating in ways we're only beginning to understand. And I'm still here, watching, waiting, bearing witness to something that will reshape how humanity understands its place in the cosmos. 7 years. That's all that's left of the old world. The world where we thought we were the only conscious observers in our corner of reality. 7 years until recognition spreads wide enough that denial becomes impossible. 7 years until the watchers can finally be acknowledged by those they've been watching for so long. I'll be here when it happens. Sienna will be here. Thousands of others who've seen the lights, who've made contact, who've become bridges between worlds. We'll all be here, ready to help humanity take its next step. The light that didn't belong on the canyon wall belonged there all along. We just weren't ready to see it. But we're getting ready now. Day by day, witness by witness, we're expanding our perception, preparing for the crossing. And when it comes, when that boundary finally dissolves and we can see them as they truly are, and they can see us as we truly are, everything will change. Everything. The desert nights are never truly dark anymore, not if you know how to look. The lights are always there, watching, waiting, pulsing their patient rhythms in places where the veil is thin. They're there in the canyons and the high mesas, in the quiet spaces between stars, in the moments just before dawn when the world holds its breath between darkness and light. They're there. They've always been there. And soon, everyone will see. You need to understand something about road maintenance in the canyon country. Nothing ever makes complete sense out here. The landscape shifts, not dramatically, not in ways you can see happening, but over time. A trail that was passable last season gets swallowed by a rock slide. A road you've driven 100 times suddenly has a washout that seems to have appeared overnight. The desert has its own timeline, its own logic, and if you work out here long enough, you learn to accept that. But what Camila and I found on that April morning wasn't something you could chalk up to erosion or weather. It was something else entirely. Something that still keeps me up at night, 6 months later, wondering what the hell I actually saw. My name is Eli Booker. I've been working road maintenance for the Bureau of Land Management in southeastern Utah for 11 years. It's not glamorous work. Mostly, it's filling potholes, clearing debris, making sure the tourist routes stay passable and safe. You spend a lot of time alone, or with one other crew member, driving unpaved roads that most people will never see, checking mile markers and drainage culverts, and making notes on clipboards that probably nobody reads. Camila Ortiz joined our crew about 3 years ago. She'd worked construction in Albuquerque before moving to Moab. Said she wanted to be closer to the desert, away from the noise of cities. She was good at the work, careful and thorough. The kind of person who actually reads the survey maps instead of just guessing where things are supposed to be. That morning, we were assigned to check the new trail markers along the Needle's Edge scenic route. Some contractor had been hired to install reflective posts and paint lines on the road surface to make it easier for tourists to navigate at dawn or dusk. The route wound through some pretty remote country southwest of Dead Horse Point, about 40 miles from the nearest gas station. We left the yard at 6 a.m. in the F-250, loaded with our usual gear. Cones, paint, tools, water, first aid kit, satellite phone because regular cell service was non-existent out there. The sunrise was one of those that makes you remember why you took this job. The canyon walls turning from purple to red to orange as the light hit them, shadows stretching impossibly long across the valley floor. Contract work's been getting sloppy, Camilla said as we turned onto the dirt access road. Last 3 jobs we've had to come back and fix their mistakes. Budget cuts, I said. They hire the lowest bidder, bidder hires whoever shows up, and we get to clean up the mess. The Needle's Edge route was about 12 miles of improved dirt road that followed a ridge overlooking a deep canyon. It was popular with photographers and geology types, less so with regular tourists because it was slow going and the drop-offs were significant. The contractor had been hired to make it safer, more visible, better marked. We reached the start of the route around 7:30. The first few miles looked fine. Fresh paint on the road surface, good clear lines, reflective posts every 50 yards on the outer edge. Standard work. Camilla was driving while I checked off waypoints on the survey map. Marker 47 coming up, I said, looking at the GPS unit mounted on the dash. But when we got there, the marker wasn't where it should have been. According to the map, it should have been on the left side of the road, marking a curve. Instead, we found it about 30 feet off the road, standing in open desert scrub. Camilla stopped the truck. That's not right. We got out to look. The post was properly installed, cemented into the ground, reflective coating intact. But it was in completely the wrong location. I checked the GPS again, then the map. No question about it. This marker was wildly misplaced. Maybe they got confused with the coordinates, Camilla said. Maybe. But it bothered me. These contractors use the same GPS units we did. You'd have to be pretty incompetent to be off by 30 feet. We continued on. Marker 48 was in the right place. So was 49. But 50 was missing entirely, and 51 was lying on its side in a wash 20 feet below the road level like someone had thrown it over the edge. This is ridiculous, Camilla muttered. How did this pass inspection? Don't think it did. That's why we're out here. By the time we reached mile marker 8, we'd documented 17 placement errors, 6 missing posts, and 3 spots where the paint lines just stopped. Not faded, not weathered off, just ended mid-stripe, like whoever was doing the work had gotten bored and quit. Then we came around a bend and saw something that made both of us go quiet. The road continued ahead for maybe another 100 yards before reaching a section where the canyon wall rose vertically on the right side. But the paint line, the bright yellow stripe that was supposed to mark the road edge, didn't stop at the wall. It continued straight up the rock face, not like someone had accidentally sprayed paint there. Like the line was meant to be there. Like the road was supposed to continue vertically into the stone. Camilla stopped the truck about 50 feet back. We both sat there, staring. "What the hell?" she said finally. I didn't answer. I was trying to process what I was seeing. The yellow line ran true and straight from the road surface up the canyon wall, getting fainter but still clearly visible, climbing about 30 feet before it disappeared into a shadow cast by an overhang. "Did they mark a climbing route or something?" Camilla asked. "By accident? Why would they use road paint for that?" "I don't know, Eli. Nothing about this job makes sense." We got out and walked toward the wall. As we got closer, I could see that the paint line wasn't just random. It was the same width as the road markings, same careful application. And where it met the wall, there was no break, no hesitation. It just turned 90 degrees and went up. "Look at this," Camilla said. She was crouching at the base of the wall, where the paint transitioned from horizontal to vertical. She ran her finger along the stone. "The rock surface isn't flat here. There's a groove, I knelt beside her. She was right. There was a very shallow indentation in the stone, maybe a quarter-inch deep, running along the path of the painted line, like something had pressed into the rock. Not carved it, not chipped it. Pressed into it the way you'd press your thumb into clay. "That's not natural weathering," I said. "No." Camilla stood up, backing away from the wall. Her face had gone pale. "Eli, what could make a mark like that in solid sandstone?" "I don't know." We followed the groove up with our eyes. It was harder to see the higher it went, but the line of slightly darker stone was visible, following the paint stripe up the canyon wall. "We should document this," Camilla said. She pulled out her camera and started taking photos. Wide shots of the wall, close-ups of the groove, pictures from different angles. I got the measuring tape from the truck and recorded dimensions. The groove was approximately 8.5 inches wide, consistent along its entire visible length. 8.5 inches, about the width of a vehicle tire. That thought sat in my mind like a stone. I didn't want to voice it, didn't want to make it real by speaking it out loud, but Camilla was thinking the same thing. I could see it in the way she was looking at the groove, at the painted line, at the vertical rock face. "We need to report this," she said quietly. "Report what, exactly? That someone painted a line on a wall? There's more." She was looking at something on the ground near the wall. "Eli, come here." I walked over. She was pointing at a spot about 3 feet from the base of the wall, where the dirt and gravel gave way to bare rock. There was a mark in the stone, not a groove this time, but a clear impression, tread pattern, definitely a tire. And it wasn't just on the surface. When I ran my finger over it, I could feel that the treads went down into the rock, like the tire had pressed into stone that was somehow soft, somehow yielding, and then the stone had hardened again with the impression trapped inside it. "This isn't possible," I said. "I know. Rock doesn't work like this. You can't just press something into sandstone and have it hold the shape. That's not how geology works." "I know, Eli." Camilla's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "But it's here. We're both seeing it." I stood up and looked around. The area seemed completely normal otherwise. Same red sandstone formations you see everywhere in this part of Utah. Same scrub brush and juniper, same empty sky. But something had happened here. Something that left marks that shouldn't be possible. "The contractor," I said. "Maybe they saw this. Maybe that's why the work is so sloppy. They got spooked and left. Maybe." Camilla walked back toward the truck, still taking photos as she went. "But if they saw it, why didn't they report it?" "Same reason we're standing here trying to rationalize it instead of calling it in. Because there's no rational explanation. Because nobody's going to believe us." We spent another hour documenting everything we could find. More tire impressions in the rock, all of them heading towards the wall. More of that shallow groove extending up the stone face, and something else we found near the washout about 20 yards back. A fresh scrape mark along the canyon wall at about the height where a vehicle's side mirror would hit. "Something drove here," Camilla said. "Recently, and it didn't stop at the wall. That's impossible. So are tire tracks embedded in solid rock. So is a painted road line going straight up a vertical cliff. Impossible seems to be relative out here." We packed up the equipment and got back in the truck. Neither of us spoke for a while. I was trying to think through the logistics of reporting what we'd found. How do you write this up? Discovered evidence of vehicle entering solid rock face. That was a good way to get sent for a drug test. "What do we do?" Camilla asked. "We finish the inspection, document the rest of the route. Then we go back and file our report on the contractor's work. We include photos of the wall and the marks. Let someone else figure out what to make of it." You don't want to investigate further. I did. Part of me desperately wanted to understand what we'd seen. But another part, the part that had learned over 11 years to respect the desert's strangeness, wanted to mark it down and move on. Some things you don't poke at. Not our job, I said. We're road maintenance. We document hazards and move on. This is... I don't even know what this is, but it's above our pay grade. Camilla nodded slowly. Okay. But Eli, I'm coming back here, on my own time, with better equipment. I need to understand this. I wanted to tell her that was a bad idea, that some things are better left alone, but I couldn't, because I knew I'd probably do the same thing in her position. We continued the inspection. The rest of the route was just as badly marked as the first section, but nothing else as strange as what we'd found at the wall. By the time we finished and headed back toward town, it was early afternoon. The heat was building, that dry desert heat that pulls moisture out of everything. We were about 5 miles from the highway when Camilla suddenly hit the brakes. "What?" I asked. She was looking in the rearview mirror. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "There was something on the road behind us, something moving." I turned around. The road stretched empty behind us, just dirt and rock and distance. "I don't see anything." "It was there, just for a second. Like a shadow, but moving fast. Too fast for a person or an animal. Probably a dust devil. Maybe." But she didn't sound convinced. We made it back to the yard by 3 p.m. Our supervisor, Marcus, was in the office doing paperwork when we walked in with our clipboard and camera. "How'd it go?" he asked without looking up. "Contractor work is a mess," I said. "Misplaced markers, missing posts, paintwork that just stops randomly. We got photos." "Great. Write it up, send it to contracting. They'll dock the company's pay." Now he looked up. "That it?" Camilla and I exchanged a glance. "There was one anomaly," I said carefully. "At mile marker 8.3, the paint line continues up a rock wall. There are also some unusual marks in the stone that we couldn't identify." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Unusual how?" "They look like tire impressions, but they're embedded in the rock, not just on the surface." A long pause. Marcus put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "You're telling me you found tire tracks in solid stone?" "Yes. And you're both seeing this? This isn't just one of you?" "We both saw it," Camilla confirmed. "We have photos." "Show me." Camilla pulled up the images on the camera. Marcus looked through them slowly, his expression growing more puzzled with each picture. Finally, he handed the camera back. "I don't know what that is," he said. "Could be anything. Water erosion, mineral deposits. Hell, could be a hoax. Someone playing with sculpting tools." "The paint line goes straight up the wall," I said. "That's not erosion or minerals." "Then it's vandalism. Someone thought it would be funny to extend the line." Marcus picked up his pen again. "Document it in your report. I'll flag it for the geology team at the university. They sometimes like to check out weird rock formations, but as far as we're concerned, it's just another contractor screw-up. Mark the section for remediation and move on." That was that. We filed our report, attached the photos, and clocked out. As I was walking to my truck, Camilla caught up with me. "He didn't take it seriously," she said. "Would you, if you hadn't seen it?" "No, I guess not." She looked west, toward where the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. "I'm going back out there tomorrow. It's my day off. You want to come?" Every instinct told me to say no. To let it go. Move on. Forget about the impossible marks in the stone. But curiosity is a powerful thing. And I'd spent 11 years in the desert learning that sometimes the strangest things turn out to have the simplest explanations. Maybe if we went back, looked more carefully, we'd find something we'd missed. Something that would make sense of it all. "Yeah," I said. "I'll come." We met at 6 a.m. the next morning at the same turnoff where the access road branched from the highway. Camila had brought more equipment this time. A better camera, a handheld GPS unit, a portable ground-penetrating radar unit she'd borrowed from a friend who did archaeological surveys, and a climbing kit with ropes and harnesses. "You planning to climb the wall?" I asked, looking at the gear. "If I have to, I want to see where that groove goes, where the paint line ends." I'd brought my own additions, a high-powered spotlight, extra batteries, a geology hammer, and a sample collection kit. If there was something unusual about the rock composition where those impressions were, maybe we could figure out what. The drive out took about an hour. The morning was clear and cool, the kind of perfect desert dawn where everything seems possible and nothing seems threatening. But as we got closer to the site, I felt that familiar unease building. The same feeling you get when you're about to do something you know might be a mistake. We parked in the same spot as the day before and walked to the wall. In the morning light, everything looked different. The painted line seemed less dramatic, more like simple vandalism. The groove in the rock was less pronounced, harder to see. For a moment, I wondered if we'd somehow exaggerated what we'd seen the previous day. Then Camilla knelt at the base of the wall and ran her hand along the tire impression in the rock, and I knew we hadn't imagined anything. "It's deeper than I remember," she said. "Look, you can see individual tread patterns. These are from a light truck or SUV tire. All-terrain pattern." I crouched beside her. She was right. The impression was incredibly detailed, showing not just the general tread, but specific features. Wear patterns, a small cut in one of the grooves, even what looked like a pebble embedded in the tread. This wasn't erosion or natural rock formation. This was an actual tire that had somehow pressed into solid sandstone. "Let's try the GPR," Camila said, pulling out the ground-penetrating radar unit. I'd seen these used before on construction sites. They send radio waves into the ground and measure the reflections to create an image of what's below the surface. Useful for finding buried utilities or archaeological features. I had no idea if it would work on a vertical rock face, but Camilla seemed confident. She powered it up and calibrated it, then slowly moved the sensor across the area where the tire impression was deepest. The small screen showed a series of colored bands and shapes that meant nothing to me. "Huh," she said. "What?" "There's something there. About 6 inches into the rock. It's showing a void space, like a hollow area following the same path as the groove we can see on the surface." "A hollow area? In the middle of solid rock?" "That's what it's showing." She moved the sensor up, following the groove higher. "It continues, see? The hollow space tracks with the visual groove all the way up." She looked at me. "Eli, it's like something carved a tunnel through the rock. Not on the surface. Through it." My mouth went dry. "That's not possible. None of this is possible. But it's here." I stood up and backed away from the wall, trying to get perspective on the whole thing. The painted line, the groove, the tire impression, and now evidence of a hollow space running through solid rock. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion, that something had driven not into the wall, but through it. Somehow. "We need to see where it goes," Camila said. She was already unpacking the climbing gear. "I'm going up." "Wait. Hold on. We should think about this." "What's to think about? There's a physical phenomenon here that defies explanation. We need more data. Or we need to call someone who actually knows what they're doing. A geologist, a physicist, someone. And tell them what? That we found a magic road that goes into a rock, They'll laugh at us. She started sorting through carabiners and rope. I'm going up. You can stay down here and spot me if you want. Or you can go wait in the truck. Your choice. I knew there was no talking her out of it. When Camila decided something, she was immovable. Fine. But we do this safely. Double-check all the gear. If anything feels wrong, you come back down immediately. Deal. It took 20 minutes to set up the anchor system. We found a solid boulder about 30 feet back from the wall that could serve as an anchor point. Camila put on the harness, clipped in, and approached the wall with the coiled rope over her shoulder. Okay, she said. I'm going to follow the groove as far as I can. Watch the rope. She started climbing. The wall wasn't completely vertical. It had enough of an angle that someone with experience could manage it, and Camila was a solid climber. I'd been out with her on some of the easier routes around Moab, knew she was careful and competent. She made it up about 20 feet without any trouble, following the faint groove in the rock. Then she stopped. Eli? You seeing this? Seeing what? The groove. It's getting wider and deeper. It's like... She paused, pressed her hand against the rock. It's like the path is more pronounced the higher I go. That doesn't make sense. Erosion would work the other way. Water flows down, not up. Can you still see the paint line? Yeah, it's fainter, but it's there. Heading toward that overhang. She looked up. I'm going to try to reach it. She climbed another 10 feet. I could see her moving carefully, testing each handhold before committing her weight. The groove was definitely more visible now. A clear channel in the rock face about 10 inches wide. This is weird, Camila called down. The rock texture is different here. It's smoother, almost polished, like something rubbed against it repeatedly. She reached for the next handhold and suddenly stopped. Oh, what? What is it? There's something here, under the overhang. Her voice had changed, lower, more cautious. It looks like, I don't know what it looks like. I'm coming down. What did you see? Just, give me a minute. She started descending quickly, moving with the kind of controlled urgency that suggested she was trying not to panic. When she reached the ground, she unclipped and stepped back from the wall, her face pale. There's an opening, she said. Under the overhang. Not a cave exactly. More like a gap. Like the rock face splits apart, and the groove leads into it. I looked up at the overhang. From ground level, it just looked like a shadow. How big is the opening? Big enough, maybe 6 feet wide, 4 feet high, and Eli, there are marks around the edges, like something scraped against them, metal on stone. We stood there in silence, both of us processing that information. An opening in the rock face, 30 feet up, that something had apparently driven into. That's what all the evidence suggested. That's what didn't make any sense. We need to see what's inside, Camila said. No, absolutely not. We need to leave and call this in to someone qualified to investigate it. Who? Who do we call? Park Service. They'll tell us it's not their jurisdiction. University? They'll want to study it for months before doing anything. By the time anyone takes this seriously, it could be gone. Gone? How would it be gone? It's a hole in a rock face. You know what I mean. Things like this, anomalies, whatever you want to call them, they don't last. They change. They disappear. If we wait, we might lose our chance to understand what this is. I wanted to argue, but part of me knew she was right. The desert kept its secrets, and you had to grab them when you had the chance. Okay, but I'm coming with you this time. We both go up, we look, we document, we get out. No exploring, no going inside, just observation. Agreed. We geared up together this time, both in harnesses, both clipped to the rope. The climb was harder for me than it had been watching Camila do it. I'm not as comfortable with heights, and every foot up felt like pushing against instinct. But I made it, following her path, using the same handholds she'd tested. As we got higher, I could see what she'd meant about the groove. It was definitely more pronounced up here, worn smooth like a water channel but heading upward instead of down. The painted line had faded to almost nothing, just a ghost of yellow against the red stone. We reached the overhang and I saw the opening. Camilla hadn't exaggerated. There was a gap in the rock face, like the stone had split vertically, creating a narrow passage that led back into darkness. The edges of the opening showed scrape marks, definitely metal on stone, fresh enough that they hadn't weathered yet. "I'm going to take some photos," Camilla said, pulling out her camera with one hand while maintaining her grip with the other. I leaned closer to the opening, trying to see inside. The passage appeared to continue back at a slight upward angle. The floor of it, if you could call it that, was smooth, worn, like something had been dragged across it repeatedly. And there were marks. More tire tracks, clearer than the ones we'd found below, leading into the darkness. "This is real," I said quietly. "Something actually went in there." "Yeah." Camilla finished taking photos and clipped the camera back to her belt. "Question is, what? And more importantly, where did it go?" I pulled out the spotlight and shone it into the opening. The beam reached back maybe 30 feet before the passage curved, and the light couldn't penetrate further. But in that 30 feet, I could see that the walls were smooth, almost polished, and the tire tracks continued clearly, heading up. "It's like a tunnel," I said, "but not carved. More like compressed, like something pushed the rock aside rather than removing it." "Can rock do that? Can it be compressed like clay?" "No, not sandstone. Not any rock I know of." I moved the light, trying to see more details. That's when I noticed something else. "Camilla, look at the walls. You see those patterns?" She leaned in. "What patterns?" "Those lines, those regular striations. They're evenly spaced, running parallel to the passage direction." I counted them quickly. 7 lines per inch, like they were pressed into the stone by something moving through here. "Tread marks," Camilla said. "From whatever went through." "Eli, this is insane. How is this possible?" "I don't know." We stayed there for another 10 minutes, documenting everything we could from our position. The opening, the passage, the marks on the walls, the tire tracks leading inward. Finally, when my arms were getting tired from holding onto the rock face, we descended back to the ground. "We have to go in there," Camilla said as soon as we were back down and unclipped. "No, Eli, no. This is beyond us. This is beyond anything either of us is qualified to handle. We have documentation, we have photos, we have measurements. That's enough. Now we take it to someone who might actually be able to explain it. Or we could just, no." I said it firmly. "I'm not climbing into a mysterious tunnel in a rock face without understanding what made it or where it leads. That's not curiosity, Camilla. That's stupidity." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, you're right. But we need to find someone who will take this seriously. Someone who won't just dismiss it as a natural formation or tell us we're seeing things. The university has a geology department. Let's start there." We packed up the climbing gear and were loading it into the truck when I heard something. A sound from somewhere above us, somewhere on the cliff face, like rock scraping against metal. The same sound a vehicle makes when its undercarriage drags over stone. I looked up. Nothing visible. Just the rock face, the overhang, the morning shadows. "You heard that too?" Camilla asked quietly. "Yeah." We stood there, listening. The sound came again, fainter this time, seeming to come from inside the wall. Then it faded completely, replaced by the normal desert quiet. "Let's go," I said. "Now." We got in the truck and I started the engine. As we pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. The rock face looked completely normal in the morning light. Just another canyon wall in Utah. Nothing unusual about it at all, except for the yellow paint line climbing vertically into shadow, and the tire tracks embedded in stone, and the tunnel that shouldn't exist leading into the rock. We drove in silence for about 10 miles before Camila spoke. "I'm going to have a hard time sleeping tonight." "Yeah, me too. Because every time I close my eyes, I'm going to wonder what's at the end of that tunnel, where it leads. What made it?" "Don't." I kept my eyes on the road. "Don't start down that path. We saw something we can't explain, that's all. We document it, we report it, we move on, that's the job. Is it though? Because I don't think I can move on from this." I didn't respond, because I knew she was right. This wasn't the kind of thing you could forget. The image of those tire tracks leading into darkness, heading upward into solid rock, was burned into my mind. I'd be seeing it for a long time. We reached the highway and turned east toward Moab. The morning was getting hot now, heat shimmer starting to rise from the pavement. Everything looked normal, rational, real, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd crossed some kind of boundary back there, that we'd seen evidence of something that changed the basic rules about how the world worked. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to believing the world is simple and straightforward and bound by consistent laws. "Tomorrow," Camila said as we pulled into town. "Tomorrow we go to the university, first thing, and we don't leave until someone agrees to investigate." "Okay. And Eli? If they won't investigate, if they blow us off or tell us it's nothing." She looked at me. "I'm going back in there. Into the tunnel, I need to know." I wanted to tell her that was a terrible idea, that some mysteries are better left unsolved, but looking at her face, at the determination there, I knew nothing I said would change her mind. "If you go," I said quietly, "I'm going with you. Someone needs to make sure you don't do anything too stupid." She smiled just a little. "Thanks." We drove the rest of the way in silence, both of us thinking about that tunnel in the rock, wondering where it led, wondering what we'd gotten ourselves into by finding it. The geology professor at the university was named Dr. Michael Torres. He was in his 50s, bearded, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and he did not want to talk to us. "I appreciate you coming in," he said, barely glancing at the photos Camila had spread across his desk. "But I'm really not the person for this. My specialty is sedimentary analysis, not field investigation of alleged anomalies." "These aren't alleged," Camila said. "They're real. We saw them, we documented them. And with respect, Doctor, someone needs to look at this seriously." Dr. Torres picked up one of the photos, the close-up of the tire impression in the rock. He studied it for maybe 3 seconds before putting it back down. "It's an interesting formation. Could be a number of things. Mineral deposits that happen to look like tread patterns. Erosion creating random textures. Without actually being on site and running proper tests, I can't say more than that." "We have GPS coordinates," I said. "You could go out there, today if you wanted. It's less than an hour's drive." "I'm sure it is. But I have classes to teach, papers to grade, and about 15 other projects that actually have funding and institutional support. I can't just drop everything to investigate every unusual rock formation that catches someone's eye." He started gathering the photos. "I'll tell you what. Write up a formal report with all your documentation, submit it to the department, and we'll add it to the queue of phenomena to investigate. Might be a few months before we can get to it, but—" "A few months?" Camila's voice rose. "Doctor, there's a tunnel in that rock face, a tunnel that leads upward, that has clear tire tracks in it. that shouldn't exist according to any geological process I've ever heard of. That's not something that can wait months. Dr. Torres's expression hardened. Ms. Ortiz, I've been studying rock formations for 30 years. I've seen everything from perfectly spherical boulders to natural arches that look like they were carved by artists. The desert creates unusual structures. That's what it does. Now, if you're telling me you found evidence of some kind of mining operation or illegal excavation, that's a law enforcement matter. If you're suggesting something paranormal or unexplained, well, that's not science. And I only deal in science. We left with nothing except a promise that our report would be reviewed when time permitted. Walking back to the parking lot, Camilla was furious. He didn't even look at the GPR data, didn't care about the measurements, just dismissed us like we were tourists who found a weird-looking rock. Maybe we need to try someone else, different department, or a different university. Or maybe we stop asking permission and just go back there ourselves. I'd been afraid she'd say that. Camila, tonight. We go back tonight with proper gear. Lights, rope, supplies. We go into that tunnel and we find out where it leads. Because nobody else is going to take this seriously, and I'm not waiting months for some academic committee to decide if it's worth their time. What if it's dangerous? What if the tunnel collapses? What if there's something in there? Something like what? I didn't have an answer. What could be in there? What could create a tunnel through solid rock and leave tire tracks heading upward into darkness? I know you're scared, Camilla said more gently. I'm scared too. But Eli, we found something impossible. Something that breaks the rules we thought we understood. We can't just walk away from that. She was right. As much as I wanted to forget about the tunnel and go back to my normal routine of fixing potholes and marking hazards, I knew I couldn't. The mystery would eat at me. The questions would pile up until they became unbearable. Okay, I said, tonight. But we do this smart. We tell someone where we're going. We set a time limit. If we're not back by dawn, someone knows to come looking. Who do we tell? Good question. Who could we trust with information about an impossible tunnel without having them think we were crazy or trying to talk us out of going? Marcus, I said finally. Our supervisor. He saw the photos. He knows something weird is out there. We tell him we're doing a follow-up investigation on our day off. We give him the coordinates and tell him if he doesn't hear from us by 6 a.m., call search and rescue. Will he go for that? Probably not, but at least someone will know. We spent the rest of the afternoon gathering supplies. Proper climbing helmets with mounted lights, 100 feet of rope, first aid kit, water, lots of water, protein bars, emergency blankets, a satellite communicator with an SOS button, 2 handheld radios in case we got separated. And, because I'd started thinking about the stranger possibilities, a can of bear spray and a large wrench I could use as a weapon if needed. You really think we'll need weapons? Camilla asked, watching me pack. Probably not. But if there's something in that tunnel, something that made it, I'd rather be prepared. At 6 p.m., we stopped by Marcus's house. He lived in town, a small place with a yard full of desert plants and a truck in the driveway that had seen more miles than mine. This better be important, he said when he answered the door. Game just started. I handed him a piece of paper with GPS coordinates and our emergency contact information. We're going back out to that site, the one with the unusual rock formations. If you don't hear from us by 6 a.m. tomorrow, those coordinates are where we'll be. Call, search, and rescue. Marcus looked at the paper, then at us, then back at the paper. You're kidding. No. You're going out there at night to look at rocks? To investigate an anomaly that we believe requires immediate attention, Camilla said. Right. Marcus folded the paper and stuck it in his shirt pocket. And what exactly am I supposed to tell search and rescue? That you two went rock hunting at night and didn't come back? Tell them whatever you want. Just make sure they go to those coordinates if we're not back by dawn." He studied us for a long moment. "You know what? I don't want to know. Whatever you're doing, it's on your own time and your own responsibility. But yeah, if you're not back by morning, I'll send someone." He started to close the door, then stopped. "Be careful out there. Desert's dangerous enough in daylight." We reached the site just as the sun was setting, that brief magical period when the canyon walls glow like they're lit from within. The temperature was already dropping. It would be in the 40s by midnight, cold enough to be uncomfortable, but not dangerous if we stayed moving. We parked and geared up in silence. The wall looked different in the fading light, more imposing, more forbidding. The painted yellow line was barely visible now, just a faint trace leading up into shadow. "Last chance to back out," I said. "Not a chance." We clipped in and started climbing. It was harder in the growing darkness, even with the helmet lights. Every handhold had to be tested carefully, every foothold checked twice. But we made it to the overhang and pulled ourselves up to the opening. The gap in the rock looked like a mouth in the beam of my headlamp, dark and waiting. The tire tracks were clearly visible, leading inward, heading up. "You ready?" Camilla asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." She went first, crawling into the opening, her light moving deeper into the passage. I followed, feeling the smooth rock under my hands, cool and somehow wrong. Rock shouldn't feel like this. Shouldn't be this smooth, this polished. The passage was tight at first, maybe 4 feet high and 6 feet wide, forcing us to move in a crouch. But after about 20 feet, it opened up. We were able to stand, though I had to bend my neck slightly to avoid hitting the ceiling. "Look at this," Camilla said, shining her light on the walls. "The striations. They're everywhere. Like something with treads rolled through here, pressing the pattern into the stone." She was right. The walls were covered in those regular parallel lines, 7 per inch, running the length of the passage. And the floor showed clear tire tracks, 2 parallel lines heading upward at a slight but steady incline. "This goes up," I said. "Into the cliff. That doesn't make geological sense. Tunnels in rock usually follow existing fractures or weakness. They go horizontally or down. They don't go up through solid stone. Nothing about this makes sense. Come on." We followed the passage upward. It curved gently, never straight for more than 30 or 40 feet, always climbing. The air was cool, but not stale. Somehow, ventilation was getting in. I could feel a very faint breeze coming from ahead, carrying a smell I couldn't quite identify. Ozone, maybe? Like the air after a lightning strike. We'd gone maybe 200 feet when Camilla stopped. "Eli, look at this." She was shining her light on the wall where a section of rock had a different color. Darker, almost metallic. And there were marks. Scrape marks. Definitely metal on stone and something else. Something that looked like paint transfer. "That's from a vehicle," I said. "That's paint, red paint, like from a truck or SUV. So something did drive through here, something real, something physical. Not some geological process or natural phenomenon, an actual vehicle." We kept moving. The passage continued upward, winding through the rock like the path of some impossible worm. Every 20 feet or so, we'd find more evidence. Scrape marks, paint transfers, tire impressions deep in the stone floor. Whoever or whatever had come through here had done it recently, and done it in a vehicle that left clear physical evidence. After about 30 minutes of climbing, the passage leveled out. We emerged into a wider space, maybe 20 feet across and 15 high. Our lights couldn't reach the far wall at first. It was like standing in a room carved into the stone. "What is this?" Camilla whispered. We moved forward slowly. As our lights swept across the space, I saw that the walls weren't smooth here. They were covered in marks. Not random marks. Organized patterns. Lines and curves and shapes that looked almost like writing, but in no language I recognized. And in the center of the space, impossible and undeniable, sat a vehicle. It was an older Ford Bronco, probably late 80s or early 90s, painted red with a white roof. The passenger side was heavily scraped, the mirror torn off, the paint stripped away in long gouges. All 4 tires showed severe wear. The windshield was intact but covered in a fine red dust, and it was sitting on solid rock, 30 feet inside a cliff face, in a chamber that shouldn't exist. "Oh my God," Camilla breathed. "It's real. It's actually real." We approached cautiously. The Bronco looked abandoned, but not old. The tires weren't flat. The battery appeared to be connected. When I shone my light through the window, I could see the interior was relatively clean, with a jacket thrown across the back seat and a coffee cup in the holder. "Someone drove this here," I said. "Recently. But how? How did they get it through the tunnel? How did they even find the tunnel?" I tried the door. Unlocked. It opened with a squeak of hinges and the dome light came on, weak but working. The keys were in the ignition. "Eli, should we—" "No. Don't touch anything. This is evidence of what? I don't know, but we need to document it exactly as it is." Camilla pulled out her camera and started taking photos. The Bronco, the chamber, the marks on the walls. I searched the vehicle's interior with my light, looking for anything that might explain what had happened. In the glove compartment, I found a registration. The vehicle was registered to a Mark Hensley at an address in Grand Junction, Colorado. The registration had expired 3 months ago. "Grand Junction," I said. "That's about an hour and a half from here. Should we try to start it?" I looked at the ignition, at the keys hanging there. Part of me wanted to turn the key and see what happened, but another part, the part that had learned to respect the desert's mysteries, told me that would be a very bad idea. "No, let's keep exploring, see if there's another way out." We moved past the Bronco to the far side of the chamber. There was indeed another passage, similar to the one we'd entered through but heading in a different direction. Up, always up. The tire tracks continued, leading away from the Bronco into the darkness. "Someone drove through," Camilla said, "parked here, and then walked out, following this passage. Or something else happened, something that made them leave the vehicle." We followed the second passage. It was narrower than the first, more winding, and the climb was steeper. Several times I had to use my hands to pull myself up sections that were almost vertical. The tire tracks were gone now, replaced by footprints, boot prints, deep and clear in the layer of dust that covered the stone. We climbed for another 20 minutes. My legs were burning, my lungs working hard in the thin air. We had to be 100 feet above where we'd started, maybe more, climbing through solid rock in a passage that physics said shouldn't exist. Then the passage opened up again. We stumbled out into open air, and I realized we'd reached the top of the cliff. We were standing on a flat mesa about 2 acres in size, surrounded by darkness in all directions. The stars overhead were brilliant, uncountable, and the moon was just rising in the east. "We made it through," Camilla said. "The tunnel goes all the way through the cliff, from the road below to the mesa top." I turned around, looking back at the opening we'd emerged from. It was narrow, barely 3 feet wide, almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. The passage had brought us up through hundreds of feet of solid rock, defying everything I understood about geology and physics. "But why?" I asked. Who would make a tunnel like this? And how? Camila was walking across the mesa top, her light sweeping back and forth. "Eli, over here." I joined her. She was standing at what looked like a campsite. There was a ring of stones for a fire, though no evidence of recent burning. A flat space where a tent might have been set up, and scratched into the rock surface in letters about 6 inches high. Mark Hensley, April 3rd, 2024. I followed the light. Below that, in smaller letters, it goes higher. "The light," I said. He saw something, a light, and he followed it. Followed it where? There's nothing up here but rock and sky. But even as she said it, I realized that wasn't quite true. I could see something now in the distance, maybe a mile away. A faint glow against the darkness, not like a campfire or headlights, more like the quality of light you see during an eclipse, soft and diffuse and somehow wrong. "You see that?" I asked. "Yeah." Camilla's voice was quiet. "Should we?" "No, absolutely not. We found the vehicle. We found evidence of what happened. That's enough. We go back, we report this to the authorities, and we let them handle it. But what if Mark Hensley is still out there? What if he needs help? That light is a mile away across rough terrain in the dark, and this whole situation is so far beyond normal that I don't trust any of it. We go back. Now." We stood there for a long moment, both of us staring at that distant glow. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, like a beacon drawing you forward. I could feel the pull of it, the curiosity, the need to know what it was. "Eli," Camilla's voice shook me out of it. "Let's go. You're right, this is too much." We turned away from the light and headed back to the tunnel entrance. The climb down was faster than the climb up, gravity helping us along. We reached the chamber with the Bronco and paused long enough for Camilla to take a few more photos. Then we continued down the first passage, retracing our steps, following our boot prints in the dust. We emerged from the tunnel onto the cliff face just as the moon fully cleared the horizon. The climb down to the ground was careful and slow, both of us exhausted now, running on adrenaline and the desperate need to be back on solid ground, back in the normal world where rocks don't have tunnels running through them and vehicles don't drive into cliff faces. When we finally reached the truck, it was 1:30 a.m. We'd been inside the tunnel for more than 6 hours. We stripped off the climbing gear and collapsed into the seats, neither of us speaking. Finally, Camilla said, "What do we do now?" "We call the authorities, report the vehicle, give them the registration information. Let them decide how to proceed. And the tunnel? The marks on the walls? The light on the mesa? We tell them everything, and we let them think we're crazy if they want. But we tell them the truth." We drove back toward Moab in silence. When we reached cell coverage, I pulled over and called the county sheriff's office. I reported finding an abandoned vehicle in an unusual location and gave them the GPS coordinates for the cliff base. I didn't mention the tunnel. That would come later, when we could explain it better. The dispatcher said they'd send someone out to investigate in the morning. I thanked her and hung up. "That's it?" Camilla asked. "For now. Tomorrow we'll give them a full report, everything we saw, and we'll deal with whatever comes after." We reached town just before 3 a.m. I dropped Camilla at her apartment and drove home. I was exhausted, but knew I wouldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tunnel winding upward through solid rock. Saw the Bronco sitting impossible in that chamber. Saw Mark Hensley's message scratched into stone. I followed the light. What light had he seen? Was it the same light Camilla and I had witnessed from the mesa? And where had it led him? I didn't have answers. Might never have answers. Some mysteries, I was learning, stay mysteries no matter how much evidence you gather or how many questions you ask. But I knew one thing with certainty. The world was stranger than I'd believed. The rules I thought were fixed and immutable. That rock is solid, that tunnels don't form upward through stone, that vehicles don't drive into cliff faces, those rules could be bent, broken, ignored entirely by forces or phenomena I didn't understand. The desert kept its secrets. But sometimes, if you were watching carefully enough, if you followed the impossible clues, you could catch a glimpse of something beyond explanation. Something that showed you reality was larger and stranger than you'd ever imagined. I thought about Mark Hensley out there somewhere, following his light into the darkness. I wondered if he'd found what he was looking for, or if he was still searching, still climbing, still following that pull towards something he couldn't name but couldn't resist. Outside my window, the stars were fading as dawn approached. Soon, it would be morning. The sheriff would go to the coordinates we'd provided. They'd find the cliff face, the painted line, maybe even the tunnel if they looked carefully enough. And then what? Would they investigate? Would they find the Bronco, the chamber, the passage leading up? Would they see the marks on the walls, the boot prints in the dust? The message from a man who'd gone looking for something impossible and vanished into it. I didn't know, but I'd be watching, listening, waiting to see what happened next. Because whatever was happening in those canyons, whatever strange physics or unknown phenomena was carving tunnels through solid rock and leaving tire tracks in stone, it wasn't over, it was just beginning. I've been flying helicopters for 16 years, 8 in the military, 8 doing survey work over Utah's canyon country. In that time, I've dealt with every kind of mechanical issue. Engine troubles, hydraulic failures, rotor problems, electrical shorts. I know what it sounds like when something goes wrong. I know the specific pitch of an engine about to quit, the particular vibration that means a bearing is failing, the subtle change in air pressure that tells you something critical has just broken. What happened on October 12th wasn't like any of those things. My name is Nate Levitt. I run aerial survey operations for Canyon Observation Services, a small outfit based out of Moab that does work for the BLM, the Park Service, and occasionally private clients. Most of our work is routine, checking on trail conditions, documenting erosion patterns, surveying archaeological sites. We fly a Bell 206 that's older than some of my crew but meticulously maintained. That morning, I was scheduled for a standard observation run over the Maze District southwest of Dead Horse Point. The BLM wanted updated imagery of backcountry routes that might be getting damaged by illegal off-road use. Simple 3-hour flight, maybe 4 if conditions were good. Clay Rourke was riding along as spotter. Clay worked ground patrol for the BLM, knew the territory better than anyone, and could spot a tire track from 200 feet up that most people would miss standing on it. He was in his mid-40s, quiet, competent, the kind of guy who'd been in the desert so long he was practically part of it. We did pre-flight checks at 7 a.m., everything normal. Fuel topped off, oil levels good, hydraulics responding properly. The weather was perfect, clear sky, light winds, visibility unlimited. The kind of day where flying feels effortless. We lifted off at 7:23 a.m. I logged the time in the flight recorder and turned south, climbing to about 500 feet as we crossed over the rim and headed into the canyon country. If you've never seen this landscape from the air, it's hard to describe. From the ground, the canyons are impressive. From above, they're otherworldly. Layer upon layer of colored stone, red, orange, white, purple, carved into shapes that don't look natural. Spires and mesas and slot canyons that twist like rivers of shadow. Beautiful and alien at the same time. Clay had the camera mount set up, shooting continuous video. We'd been flying for about 40 minutes when he tapped my shoulder and pointed down. "Vehicle tracks," he said through the headset. "Fresh ones, heading off the designated trail." I brought us lower and circled. He was right. You could see where someone had left the marked route and driven out across open desert, heading toward a section of canyon rim that was supposed to be restricted. "Want to follow them?" I asked. "Yeah, let's see where they go." The tracks led toward a narrow canyon that cut deep into the plateau. They went right to the edge and disappeared over the rim. "They drove down there?" Clay said. "That slope's got to be 60 degrees. Some people have more truck than sense." We followed the canyon edge, looking for where the vehicle might have gone. The walls were steep and broken, with ledges and outcrops creating complex shadows. In the morning light, some sections were bright orange while others were deep black, and the contrast made it hard to judge distances. That's when it happened. We were about 400 feet above the canyon floor, moving slowly, when the engine noise just stopped. Not sputtered, not coughed or rattled. It simply cut off, mid-cycle, like someone had hit a mute button. The sudden silence was so absolute that, for a second, I thought I'd gone deaf. I could feel my heart beating, could hear Clay breathing beside me. But no engine sound, no rotor noise, nothing. The cabin was silent except for our breathing and the soft whistle of wind past the fuselage. My hands moved automatically. Check the throttle. Check the collective. Check the instruments. Everything showed normal. RPM gauge reading in the green. Hydraulic pressure good. Temperature normal. Every indicator told me the engine was running perfectly, but I couldn't hear it. And we weren't falling. That's the part that made my training scream something was fundamentally wrong. When a helicopter loses engine power, you have maybe 2 seconds before you start dropping. You enter auto-rotation immediately, trading altitude for rotor speed. But we weren't descending. The altitude indicator held steady. The rotor was turning. I could see it through the canopy, but silently, impossibly. The helicopter hung in the air like we were suspended on invisible wires. "Nate?" Clay's voice was tight with fear. "What's happening?" "I don't know." I tried the radio. "Ground, this is Observer 1. Do you copy?" Static. Just white noise that seemed wrong somehow. Too smooth, too even. Observer 1, declaring emergency. Engine anomaly. Requesting immediate... The static cut off. Total silence again. Even the white noise was gone. I looked at Clay. His face was pale, and I realized mine probably was too. This was beyond any emergency scenario I'd trained for. Engine failure with continued flight. Loss of engine sound with functioning instruments. Radio dead, but electrical systems working. "What do we do?" Clay asked. Good question. Land immediately was the obvious answer. But where? We were over steep canyon country with no flat spaces within gliding distance. And technically, we weren't gliding. We were still flying somehow, still maintaining altitude despite the complete absence of normal operating sounds. "I'm going to try to move us toward that flat area," I said, pointing to a section of mesa top about a mile east. I adjusted the collective. The helicopter responded normally, beginning to climb. I could feel the cyclic under my hand, feel every normal response of the aircraft. But still no sound. Just that eerie silence and the whisper of wind. We climbed to 600 feet and turned toward the mesa. The flight felt smooth, stable, exactly like normal operations, except for the complete absence of noise. It was like flying in a dream, or watching a video with the sound muted. Then we crossed into shadow. The mesa we were heading toward had a high rim that blocked the morning sun, creating a massive shadow across the desert floor. As we passed from sunlight into that shadow, everything changed. sound returned, not gradually. All at once, like someone had unmuted the universe. The engine roar was suddenly there, normal volume, normal pitch. The rotor thump filled the cabin. I could hear the hydraulics whining, the instruments clicking, all the familiar sounds of a working helicopter. Jesus, Clay breathed. What the hell was that? I checked the instruments again. Everything still normal, everything functioning. It was like the last few minutes had never happened, except we both remembered it. We both experienced it. And when I looked at Clay, I could see in his face the same confusion and fear I was feeling. "We're landing," I said, "right now." I brought us down on the mesa top, setting down as gently as I've ever landed anything. The skids touched rock and I immediately shut down the engine. The engine I could hear again. The engine that was supposedly running the whole time. Clay and I sat in silence for a long moment after everything stopped. Finally, he unclipped his harness and opened his door. I did the same. We both needed to be outside, needed solid ground beneath our feet. The morning air was cool and clean. The sun was fully up now, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and red. Everything looked completely normal. "Did that really happen?" Clay asked. "We both experienced it. But how? How does an engine cut out completely and the aircraft keeps flying?" "It doesn't. It can't. The physics doesn't work that way." We walked around the helicopter checking everything. No visible damage. No leaks. No burned smells or anything that suggested mechanical failure. I opened the engine cowling and looked inside. Everything appeared normal. "Maybe it was just the sound," Clay said. "Maybe the engine was running and we couldn't hear it for some reason." "What reason? Helicopter engines are loud. You can't just not hear them." "Acoustic anomaly? Something in the air that blocked sound waves." I wanted to believe that. But sound doesn't just stop existing. You might get weird echoes in canyons, maybe some attenuation. But total silence while sitting in a running helicopter? That doesn't happen. "We need to get back," I said. "Get this checked by a mechanic. Download the flight recorder data. You think you can fly it back? Engine's working now. Everything checks out. If it happens again..." I didn't finish that sentence. We climbed back in. I went through the startup procedure carefully, listening to every sound, feeling for any anomaly. Everything was normal. I lifted off and turned north, heading back toward Moab. I kept us high, over relatively flat terrain, ready to land immediately if anything strange happened again. But the flight back was completely routine. We landed at our base at 9:47 a.m. According to my watch and the wall clock in the hangar, we'd been gone for 2 hours and 24 minutes. But when I checked the flight recorder, something was wrong. The digital log showed our takeoff at 7:23 a.m. It showed normal operation for 42 minutes. Then there was a gap, not a corrupted file or an error message. Just nothing. Empty data fields. And then the log resumed at 9:47 a.m. The total flight time, according to the recorder, 0:00. Clay was looking over my shoulder. "That's not possible. None of this is possible." I pulled up the fuel records. We'd topped off before takeoff. The fuel gauge now showed we'd burned approximately 40 gallons, consistent with 2+ hours of flight time. So we'd flown. We'd burned fuel. We'd covered distance. But according to the recorder, we'd done it in 0 time. I called our head mechanic, Eddie, and explained we'd had an anomaly during flight. Eddie said he'd start on it immediately. Clay and I went to the office to write up our reports. Sitting at my desk, trying to describe what had happened in official language, I realized how insane it all sounded. Engine noise ceased, but aircraft continued normal flight. Total acoustic silence lasting approximately 3 minutes. Flight recorder shows 0 elapsed time for confirmed 2-hour flight. None of it made sense. All of it was true. Nate? Clay was looking at his phone. I just got a message from another patrol officer. Jake Morrison. Says he was out in the Needles district this morning and saw something weird. A helicopter flying completely silent over the canyons. I felt cold. What time? He doesn't specify, just says around mid-morning. Could he have seen us? Possible. The Needles is about 20 miles from where we were, but sightlines are long. I called Jake Morrison. He picked up on the second ring. Hey Jake, it's Nate Levitt. Got your message about seeing a helicopter? Yeah, weird thing. I was checking some trail markers and heard this helicopter approaching. Looked up and saw one, but the sound was coming from the wrong direction. Like the helicopter was ahead of where the sound was. What time was this? Maybe 8:30, 8:45? Right in our incident window. Did the helicopter look normal otherwise? I guess. It was pretty far away. Just struck me as odd that the sound and position didn't match up. I thanked him and hung up. Clay was watching me. He saw it, I said. He saw us flying with the sound displaced. So it's not just us. Something actually happened to the helicopter, or to the space around it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that moment when the engine noise cut out. The absoluteness of the silence, the impossibility of continued flight. And I kept thinking about something else. When we'd crossed into shadow and sound had returned, I'd felt something. A physical sensation, like passing through a membrane. Just for an instant, there was resistance or pressure, or something I couldn't quite name. Like we'd left one space and entered another. The next morning, I arrived at the hangar early. Eddie was already there working on the helicopter. Found something, he said. Might be nothing, but it's weird. He led me to the engine compartment and pointed to one of the turbine blades. There was a faint discoloration on the metal, a subtle pattern that looked almost like frost patterns on glass, delicate lines branching and intersecting. What is that? No idea. It's not corrosion, not heat damage, and it's only on about half the blades, the ones that would have been facing west during your flight. I took photos. The patterns were subtle but definitely there, geometric and regular, almost like circuit traces. Can we get it analyzed? Already sent photos to a metallurgy contact at the university. Clay arrived with maps spread across the conference table. That's where we were when the engine went silent. He pointed to a red X. Now look at these. Blue marks for UFO sightings. Green for unusual aerial phenomena. Yellow for equipment malfunctions. Several clustered near our incident location. There's something about that specific spot, he said. Some property of the terrain that creates anomalies. My phone rang. Eddie's university contact, Dr. Martinez. Mr. Levitt, I've been looking at those turbine blade photos. Those patterns look like they were formed by exposure to extremely high magnetic fields, the kind you'd find in an MRI machine. A magnetic field while we were flying? It's the only explanation for that particular type of crystal reorganization, strong enough to alter the metal's structure at a microscopic level. Could that have affected the helicopter's operation? A strong field could potentially interfere with electronic systems. It might explain why your flight recorder shows gaps. What about sound? Could a magnetic field block sound waves? No. Magnetism doesn't interact with sound waves directly. So, we had evidence of magnetic field exposure, but that didn't explain the silence. I want to go back there, Clay said after I hung up. Tomorrow. Same route. See if it happens again. That's a terrible idea. Maybe. But it's the only way we're going to understand this. If we can reproduce it, document it better, maybe we can figure out what's causing it. He was right. As much as I wanted to move on, I knew I couldn't. Something real had happened, something that might happen to other pilots. Okay, tomorrow morning. But we do it smart, full emergency kit. Stay high over areas where we can land safely. We spent the rest of the day planning. I reviewed weather forecasts, plotted alternative landing sites, checked systems twice. Clay coordinated with ground patrol officers, asking them to watch for anything unusual. That evening, I had trouble sleeping. I kept replaying the incident, the suddenness of the silence, the feeling of the helicopter continuing to fly. That moment when we crossed into shadow and everything snapped back. The shadow. We'd been flying in full sunlight when the silence occurred. It had ended exactly when we entered the shadow cast by the rim. Was that significant? The next morning, we met at 6:30 a.m. We loaded extra equipment, backup radio, extra GPS unit, emergency beacon, and a professional audio recorder Clay would run continuously. "You really going back there?" Eddie asked. "Yeah. Be careful. Something about this doesn't sit right." We lifted off at 7:15 a.m. The morning was clear and calm. We headed south, following the same route as before. Clay had the audio recorder running, making verbal notes. Time is 7:34. Position approximately 3 miles north of yesterday's incident location. All systems normal. As we got closer, I felt my heart rate increasing. Part of me hoped nothing would happen. Part of me needed confirmation I wasn't losing my mind. "Coming up on the location," I said. We crossed over the canyon rim. Nothing happened. Engine normal, all sounds present. "Keep going," Clay said. We spent 40 minutes flying a grid pattern, varying altitude and heading. The helicopter performed perfectly the entire time. "Maybe it was a one-time thing," Clay said. Then I noticed something. A shadow line moving across the canyon floor as the sun climbed higher. The same shadow we'd entered yesterday, but reversed. "Clay, look at that shadow. Watch what happens when we cross it." I turned and approached the shadow boundary, flying from sunlight toward shade. As we crossed from light into dark, the engine sound cut out. Instantly, completely, just like yesterday. Total silence except for breathing and wind. The helicopter continuing to fly normally, instruments reading normal, but no sound. Clay grabbed the audio recorder and checked it. "It's still running, but look at the levels. It's showing near 0 decibels. I banked and flew back toward the sunlight. As we crossed from shadow into light, sound returned. Engine roar, rotor thump, everything normal. "It's the shadow," I said. "Something about that specific shadow triggers it." "How is that possible?" "Shadows aren't physical objects." "I don't know. But watch." We flew 3 more passes. Every single time, the same thing happened. Enter shadow. Silence. Exit shadow. Sound returns. Precise, repeatable, impossible. On the 4th pass, Clay was watching the GPS unit closely. "Nate, when we're in the shadow, the GPS loses signal. Complete loss. It comes back as soon as we're in sunlight. So, whatever's blocking sound is also blocking GPS signals." We made 1 more pass. When we entered the shadow and sound cut out, I watched the flight recorder screen. It was running, showing our position and heading, but when we exited and I checked the log, that entire period showed as 0 source again. "Time stops in the shadow," I said. Or, recorded time stops. We're still experiencing time, but instruments don't record it. We flew back toward Moab, both processing what we'd discovered. We'd reproduced the phenomenon, confirmed it was real, repeatable, and directly linked to a specific shadow in a specific location. When we landed, Eddie was waiting. "We reproduced it," I said. "It's the shadow. Specific shadow in a specific location." We played the audio recording. For sections in shadow, only silence and our voices. No engine noise. "So, your microphones stopped working?" Eddie asked. "No, they were running. They just didn't record engine sounds. But the helicopter's hardwired cockpit recorder shows normal engine operation." Eddie stared at the screen. "You know what this sounds like? You flew through a dead zone. A place where normal physics doesn't fully apply. Dead zone? Theoretical spaces where certain fundamental constants might have different values. Nobody's ever found a real one, but mathematically they're possible." Clay and I looked at each other. A space where physical constants were different, where sound waves didn't propagate, where time recording failed, where GPS couldn't function. "We need to report this," Clay said. We started with Dr. Martinez at the university. We met in her office the following week, spreading out our evidence. When we finished explaining, she was quiet for a long moment. "I believe you experienced what you describe. What I don't believe is that I can explain it with current physics." She pulled up some papers on her computer. "There's a concept in theoretical physics called quantum shadowing. The basic idea is that under very specific conditions, space can develop wrinkles. Places where the normal rules are locally suspended." "Like a dead zone," I said. "Exactly. The mathematics suggests these zones would be incredibly small, incredibly rare, and incredibly unstable. They shouldn't be large enough to fly a helicopter through. But if they could exist," Clay said, "what would it look like? Possibly exactly what you've described. Loss of signal propagation, time measurement anomalies. The mathematics suggests these zones would be most likely to occur at boundaries, transitions between different states, like the boundary between light and shadow. Potentially, though I don't see a clear mechanism for why that specific boundary would matter. But something was forming in my mind. What if it's about temperature? The desert has extreme temperature differences between sunlit and shaded surfaces. What if flying through that boundary creates some kind of effect?" Dr. Martinez considered this. "A thermal gradient could create unusual acoustic properties. But the GPS issues, the time recording problems, those seem unrelated. Unless they're all symptoms of something else," Clay said. "The temperature gradient isn't causing the anomaly. It's just marking where it is. Like a visible indicator of an invisible phenomenon," Dr. Martinez said. "The shadow boundary gives you a reference point, but the actual anomaly might be something deeper." She agreed to organize a research team, but it would take months. 2 days later, another pilot reported an incident. A BLM helicopter experienced complete electrical failure for 45 seconds while flying through a canyon shadow. Event recorder showed no record of the failure. "It's spreading," Clay said, "or there are more locations." I called a friend at the FAA. After a long silence, "Nate, I can't file an official report on this. It doesn't fit any known categories. There's no mechanism for reporting a spatial anomaly. So, what do I do?" "Document everything. If more incidents occur, that builds a pattern. Eventually, it becomes undeniable." Frustrating, but I understood. Bureaucracies don't move on anomalies. They move on patterns. So we kept flying, mapping boundaries, documenting conditions. We discovered the phenomenon was strongest when shadow boundaries were sharpest, early morning and late afternoon. On overcast days, it weakened or disappeared. Clay compiled data from every incident report he could find. Patterns emerged. Certain geological formations were associated with more incidents. High iron content, canyon intersections, areas with unusual magnetic readings. We found 3 more zones, smaller, more intermittent, but definitely present. We marked them, documented them, reported them. Slowly, people started paying attention. Dr. Martinez's team visited the primary site, took measurements, set up monitoring. They detected measurable magnetic anomalies along shadow boundaries. Nothing dramatic, but definitely correlated with our incident locations. Other pilots came forward with similar stories. A pattern was forming. 6 months later, the FAA issued a notice. Be aware of potential instrument anomalies in areas of sharp light-to-shadow transition. Maintain extra altitude when possible. It wasn't much, but it acknowledged something was happening. Dr. Martinez's research team got approval to visit the primary site. They spent a week taking measurements, setting up monitoring equipment. Their preliminary findings were cautious but intriguing. They detected measurable magnetic anomalies along the shadow boundaries. Nothing dramatic, but definitely present and correlated with our incident locations. Another pilot came forward with a similar story. Then another. A pattern was forming. Clay spent weeks compiling reports from pilots who'd experienced unusual phenomena in the canyon country over the years. Most had been dismissed as instrument malfunctions or pilot error, but reading them with our new knowledge, patterns emerged. Several pilots reported brief periods where their instruments froze. 3 reported temporary loss of engine sound. One described flying through what he called a bubble of silence that lasted about 30 seconds. None had been able to reproduce the experience. None had figured out the connection to shadows and sunlight. We'd stumbled on something other people had encountered but never understood. We expanded our mapping program, flying systematic grids over the entire region. It was slow work. We couldn't possibly cover every canyon, every shadow, every combination of conditions. But we found 3 more zones, places where crossing a specific boundary caused instrument glitches, brief signal losses, momentary acoustic anomalies. All occurred at sharp shadow boundaries during morning or afternoon when the sun was at specific angles. It's like the landscape itself is active, Clay said one evening, showing me updated maps. Not alive, but responsive. Certain places under certain conditions become different. Different how? I don't know. But I think the shadows are just the visible part. There might be other boundaries we can't see, other transitions where the rules change. That was a disturbing thought. If there were other invisible boundaries where helicopters suddenly stopped working, we needed to find them before someone got killed. One afternoon, about 4 months after our first incident, I was flying alone on a routine survey run. I was at 800 feet, following a canyon system I'd flown dozens of times. As I crossed from sunlight into the shadow of a high mesa wall, I felt it again. That pressure, that sensation of passing through something. The engine sound didn't cut out this time, but it changed, became muted, muffled, like hearing it through water. I climbed immediately, gaining altitude and turning back into sunlight. The sound returned to full normal volume. I marked the location carefully, noting the time, sun angle, exact position. Another zone, smaller, subtler than the first, but definitely there. I reported it immediately. Clay went out the next day with ground-based recording equipment. He confirmed the anomaly. Audio recorded from outside the zone showed normal helicopter sounds, but recordings made inside the shadow boundary showed significant attenuation, as if the sound was being absorbed or blocked by something invisible. 6 months after our first incident, the FAA finally issued a notice to pilots operating in the canyon country. Be aware of potential instrument anomalies in areas of sharp light-to-shadow transition, particularly in early morning and late afternoon. Maintain extra altitude when possible. Report any unusual experiences immediately. It wasn't much. It didn't explain what was happening, but it acknowledged something was happening, and that was a start. Dr. Martinez's team continued their work. They brought in additional researchers, a physicist specializing in field theory, an atmospheric scientist, a geologist who studied magnetic properties of rock formations. They set up permanent monitoring stations at 2 of the zones, recording data continuously. Their findings were published in a technical journal 6 months later. The paper was cautious, heavy with qualifications and acknowledgments of what they didn't understand. But the core findings were clear. There were measurable, repeatable anomalies occurring at specific locations under specific conditions. Magnetic field variations, unusual radio frequency absorption, acoustic attenuation that shouldn't be possible in open air. The paper didn't use the term dead zone. Instead, it referred to localized spatial anomalies and temporary variations in fundamental constants. But it meant the same thing. The scientific community's response was mixed. Some dismissed it as measurement error or equipment malfunction. Others found it intriguing enough to warrant further study. A few researchers started looking for similar phenomena in other locations, other deserts, other canyon systems, other places where geological and atmospheric conditions might align in unusual ways. Clay and I continued flying, mapping, documenting. We became the informal experts on canyon anomalies, the people other pilots called when they experienced something strange. We learned to predict where zones might form. Sun angle was critical. The anomalies were strongest when shadows were sharpest and most defined. Geological composition mattered too. Areas with high iron content or unusual magnetic properties were more likely to host zones. And there seemed to be a temporal component. The zones were more active during solar maximum periods, suggesting some connection to space weather and magnetic field fluctuations. We learned to recognize the warning signs, a particular quality of light, a specific feel to the air, not quite pressure, not quite temperature, but something. An instinctive sense that you were approaching a boundary where things might not work normally. And we learned to respect them. These weren't just curiosities or interesting phenomena to study. They were places where the normal rules temporarily stopped applying, where flying required extra caution and awareness of forces we didn't fully understand. I still fly through zones occasionally, not carelessly, never without proper preparation, but when research demands it or when verification is needed. Each time, I experience that same moment of transition, sound cutting out or changing quality, instruments showing zeros or anomalous readings. That sensation of passing through something, crossing from one kind of space into another. Each time, I wonder what we're really flying through, what those zones actually are. Dr. Martinez has theories, localized variations in quantum field strength, temporary changes in how electromagnetic forces propagate, regions where space itself has slightly different properties. But theories aren't answers, and we're still far from understanding what's really happening. Last week, I was flying a routine observation run north of Arches National Park. Late afternoon, long shadows stretching across the desert floor. I was at 700 feet, plenty of altitude, nowhere near any of the mapped zones. But as I crossed over a particular canyon rim, passing from light into shadow, I felt that familiar pressure, that sense of transition. The engine sound didn't cut out this time, but it changed, became muted, muffled. I climbed immediately, gaining another 200 feet and turning back into sunlight. The sound returned to normal. I marked the location on my map, noting every detail. added it to the database. Another piece of the puzzle, because that's what this is now, a puzzle we're slowly solving. Understanding where these zones form, why they form, what properties they have, each flight adds more data. Each incident report adds more context. The picture is incomplete, probably will be incomplete for years, but it's gradually coming into focus. The Canyon Country is teaching us that reality is stranger than we thought, that there are places where the rules bend, where impossible things become possible, where the landscape itself can create pockets of altered physics under the right conditions. I used to think flying was about mastering a machine and understanding physics. Now I know it's also about recognizing when those physics might not apply, when the space you're flying through isn't quite normal, when you need to trust your instincts even when instruments tell you everything is fine. The silent flight taught me that, taught me humility, taught me that 16 years of experience means nothing when you encounter something truly new, truly anomalous, truly beyond your training. And it taught me that the desert has secrets. Old secrets, deep secrets, secrets written into the rock and the light and the shadows themselves. Some of those secrets are beautiful, some are terrifying. All of them deserve respect. I still fly over the canyons, still do observation runs and survey work and routine patrols, but now I fly differently, more carefully, more aware. Paying attention not just to instruments and weather and terrain, but to the subtle signs that I'm approaching something unusual. The particular angle of light, the specific quality of shadows, that instinctive feeling that something ahead is different. Because I know now that some boundaries are invisible, that some transitions change more than just light levels, that some spaces are truly different from the ones around them. And sometimes when the light is right and the shadows are sharp, when I'm flying alone over empty canyons with nothing but stone and sky and distance, I think about that moment of silence. That impossible flight through space where time stopped and sound disappeared and all the normal rules took a break. I think about it, and I wonder what else is out there. What other zones we haven't found yet? What other boundaries we haven't crossed? The desert is vast. The anomalies are small and scattered and hard to predict. We've mapped perhaps a dozen of them, but there are thousands of canyons out there, countless shadows, infinite combinations of sun and stone and air. How many more silent zones are waiting to be discovered? How many pilots have flown through them without realizing what happened, dismissing brief instrument glitches or momentary acoustic changes as normal variations? How many mysteries are hidden in places where instruments don't work properly and time doesn't pass and the normal rules temporarily cease to apply? I don't know, but I'm still flying, still looking, still trying to understand. Because that's what pilots do. We explore, we document, we push boundaries and map the unknown, even when the unknown defies everything we thought we knew. Even when the map shows places that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. Even when flying requires accepting that sometimes, impossibly, silence can carry you home, while instruments show zero elapsed time, and the world outside continues as if nothing unusual is happening at all. The zones are still there. The anomalies continue to occur. We're better at predicting them now, better at avoiding them or prepared when we encounter them. But there's still mysteries. Still places where our understanding of reality breaks down and something else, something we can measure but not yet explain, takes over. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to understand everything immediately. Maybe the desert is teaching us patience, showing us that some answers take time, that some phenomena resist quick explanation, that some boundaries between known and unknown require careful, methodical investigation over years or decades. I can live with that, as long as I can still fly. As long as I can still explore these canyons and document these strange spaces and contribute to the slow process of understanding what's really happening out here. Because ultimately, that's what drew me to flying in the first place. Not just the freedom of flight or the beauty of the landscape, but the possibility of seeing things from a perspective nobody else has, of encountering mysteries that challenge what we think we know, of standing at the boundary between the familiar and the impossible, and choosing to look closer rather than turning away. The silent flight gave me that. Gave me a mystery worth pursuing, a puzzle worth solving, a reminder that the world is larger and stranger than we typically allow ourselves to believe.